Consciousness. Without human consciousness, there is no world. It is the presence of human consciousness that brings meaning into the world. Without human beings in this world, conscious human beings in this world, in effect, there would not be a world. We bring the world into being through our consciousness. And through our consciousness, we create the world we live in. I believe the totality of reality, our consciousness cuts out a world that fits itself. In other words, the kind of world you exist in reflects the kind of consciousness that you have. And notice, if you change your consciousness or change your values and orientation, you enter into a different world. You interact with different people. People often that you didn't even know existed in the world. Social situations that you might not have even recognized until you entered into a new level of consciousness. You see people, say for instance, who become addicted, say to crack or something, and now enter into a whole world and into a whole social system that before they became addicted, they hardly noticed. They didn't know what it was all about. And they picked up new friends and new relations, whole new ways of acting, whole new purposes in life. They lost old friends, broke with old families, all kinds of things. In other words, the consciousness, that addictive consciousness, brought into the world a new foreground and put other things into the background. Therefore, man's consciousness is a creative act. And the kind of consciousness you have will determine the kind of world you create. And consequently, when you look at the world that we live in, African people, we must recognize to a great extent it is a world of our own creation. It is a world that has been generated by the type of consciousness we've been permitted to be instilled in us as a people. As I told you earlier today on the radio, we talk about the white man as having power. And I want you to recognize that power ultimately has to do with a relationship between people. And that the white man's so-called power is to a great extent based upon the nature of the relationship he has with the black man. We empower him by the nature of our own behavior and attitudes as a people. He cannot be, as I said earlier, what he is unless we are what we are. And to a good extent, the European is our creation. Yes. We look at our behavior, we will see that to a good extent it is our behavior, our values. Consciousness. Without human consciousness, there is no world. It is the presence of human consciousness that brings meaning into the world. Without human beings in this world, conscious human beings in this world, in effect, there would not be a world. We bring the world into being through our consciousness. And through our consciousness, we create the world we live in. I believe the totality of reality, our consciousness cuts out a world that fits itself. In other words, the kind of world you exist in reflects the kind of consciousness that you have. And notice, if you change your consciousness or change your values and orientation, you enter into a different world. You interact with different people. People often that you didn't even know existed in the world. Social situations that you might not have even recognized until you entered into a new level of consciousness. You see people, say for instance, who become addicted, say to crack or something. And now enter into a whole world and enter into a whole social system that before they became addicted, they hardly noticed. They didn't know what it was all about. And they picked up new friends, and new relations, whole new ways of acting, whole new purposes in life. They lost old friends, broke with old families, all kinds of things. In other words, the consciousness, that addictive consciousness, brought into the world a new foreground and put other things into the background. Therefore, man's consciousness is a creative act. And the kind of consciousness you have will determine the kind of world you create. And consequently, when you look at the world that we live in, African people, we must recognize to a great extent it is a world of our own creation. It is a world that has been generated by the type of consciousness we've been permitted to be instilled in us as a people. As I told you earlier today on the radio, we talk about the white man as having power. And I want you to recognize that power ultimately has to do with a relationship between people. And that the white man's so-called power is to a great extent based upon the nature of the relationship he has with the black man. We empower him by the nature of our own behavior and attitudes as a people. He cannot be, as I said earlier, what he is unless we are what we are. And darling, to a good extent, the European is our creation. Yes. We look at our behavior, we will see that to a good extent it is our behavior, our values, our consciousness, the kind of personality we've established in ourselves, our tastes, our desires and needs that maintain the European in this position. We talk about the civil rights movement and the apartheid system of the South. When blacks decided just to get out of the buses and walk, the system changed. Yes. When they just stopped sitting behind the white crowd, just changing that relationship, changed the nature of power in that system. When they decided to walk side by side, when they decided to walk abreast and line themselves up, because they had not walked that way before, for the end before, the relationship changed. When they kept their monies in their pockets, when they sat on those stools and blocked the other people from them, and changed the nature of the interaction between themselves and Europeans, the nature of the system changed. So therefore we have tremendous power. It depends upon how we align ourselves as a people and how we decide to relate to other people in the world, because they cannot have what they have unless we are who we are. And that is why we don't have to spend a great deal of time always appealing to them and analyzing them, because we can better appeal to our own sense of self and our own consciousness. And we waste a lot of time trying to transform them, when through transforming ourselves, they will be transformed automatically.
Microphone check 1 2. Microphone checking. Microphone check. Just give me a sound check, kings and queens. Let me know that I can be heard out here in these streets. I want to know where I go on. Let me know something I come through nice and loud and clearly and all these things. I'll be very grateful if ones and ones can let me know right now, kings and queens. Do let me know if you can hear me. Good.
Heard out here.
Yeah. Let me turn this down. Got my second screen up. Bigging up melanated goddess in the place. Oh, there's echo. There was echo throughout the whole thing. Was there echo throughout the whole thing? throughout the whole of Amos Wilson speaking? Do I have to play it again? Very important, you know. I don't know why there's echo. Let me see if I can sort something out. Yeah, let me know if that Amos Wilson didn't play very clearly. I will play it again. Okay, I'm sounding fine. We got Simility Goddess M.A. Brown in the house. 90 for 99 in the building. Silvermans, you don't know. Who's that? I don't know how to pronounce that. Shivalus. I don't know how you pronounce them word there, you know. But yeah, okay. If the Amos Wilson just echo at parts, okay, all right. Well, if it can be heard, if it could have been heard clearly for the most part, I will just go forward. So welcome, kings and queens, to the final in this Kimoyo series. For those who may not be aware, Kimoyo is a Kikongo term which relates to vitality, life, spirit, yeah, vital force, which is moyo, and ki means pertaining to or of, yeah. And so this Kikongo terminology, and because the root word moyo can be found in so many different African languages, meaning similar things, is put forward as a term that encapsulates the meaning and the purpose of what is referred to more generally as African spirituality. And so in this series, I have been, to the best of my ability, breaking down what is a work in progress in terms of understanding and developing on African spiritual concepts. Yeah. And so we today will be focusing on ritual, the self, and nationhood. And this is probably going to be my favorite in the series because it relates to practical application in the present and the future. Yeah. And that's what we're going to be going into. So we're going to be going into an understanding of the self from an African spiritual perspective. We're going to be going into understanding ritual in African spirituality, and then nationhood. And I'm not going to go too much into that right now because I'm going to explain it in a sec. But just to say, big up ones and ones coming through. Please like the video as you come through. Like up the video as you are coming through the thing. And yeah, if you're not subscribed to Shakara Speaks, subscribe to Shakara Speaks. And what's the word? So I'm just doing some administration, kings and queens. Also, for those who want to support financially the works that I'm presenting through this series, please check the description for the PayPal link that you can make use of should you be so moved. And I give thanks in advance for all contributions that come forward. All right. So once again, PayPal link in the chat, in the description, sorry, if you want to make a financial contribution. Nothing is too small or too big to the works that I am presenting. And yeah, you know what I'm saying? You know, thank you in advance for all contributions. All right. Give me 2 seconds, kings and queens. I just want to make sure that I've done something correctly around here. All right, kings and queens. I want to thank those who have been joining me throughout the series. Next month, I am going to be doing a Messiah series. We're going to be breaking down the life and the legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and the UNIA ACL. And I'm going to have some guests joining me for that series as well. But we're going to be breaking down Marcus Mosiah Garvey from a historical perspective, but also a future perspective. We're going to look into the future and see what problems that we have today as a people that the legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey allows us to solve. All right, kings and queens, we're going to get into the thing. Let me lock off that screen there. Let me stop share. That's something, yeah. Big up Veli, the G Block is in the house. Don't know, big up yourself, king. Big up Tanya Foster. Blessings, blessings. Share the link, family. Share it far and wide. If you feel say anybody where you know, might get something from what I are about to present. All right. I'm gonna begin where I ended off last week. Okay, I'm gonna begin where I ended off last week. Yeah. Just so we follow the linkages more seamlessly. All right. Yeah. And I haven't shared it in the Hangouts. So anybody who's watching us in the Hangouts, I usually share it in the Hangouts, but just in case anybody in the Hangouts may want to, the Hangouts, the various Hangout groups that I'm in, may want to listen, please share it on my behalf. I thank you in advance. Right then, let us go. All right. So I'm just gonna make sure on my second screen that everybody can see the screen where I come up right now. Yeah. Oh man. All right. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. All right, kings and queens, we're going into the thing. Last edition in the KIMOYO series. I give thanks for those who have joined me so far. This is a work in progress, yeah. You know, we're still very much putting together this series of presentations. Obviously, the research is ongoing and the application is ongoing. But I do give thanks for the ones who have stuck with the process, who have trusted me to present some information, who have, asked questions and even challenged in some ways, shapes, and forms. Bigging up my sister Wahidism from over there in the United States of America. Thank you for joining me, my sister. I do appreciate your presence here right about now. So getting into the thing, I'm gonna speak for maybe an hour and a half, and then we're gonna get into some discussion, Q&A, ask questions, challenge, man. Do what you want to do. Yeah, come there. All right, we're not going nowhere. Okay. All right. So taken from the book Civilization or Barbarism, an Authentic Anthropology by the ancestor Sheikh Anta Diop. In one of his last chapters, he's going into a breakdown of culture, and he explores it from 3 dimensions. He explores it from the historical, the linguistic, and the psychic, or psyche. Historical, linguistic, and psyche aspects of culture, which he thinks make up or are at the foundation of our cultural development. Yeah. And he says, we have said earlier in exploring now, he's exploring the history component, okay, of developing culture. All right. We define culture in the first of this series. So check that out if you want a more in-depth definition of culture, but that's not what we're going to go into today for the sake of time. He says, we have said earlier that a people without historical conscience is a population. Yeah. So we immediately now we're dealing with today ritual, the self, and nationhood. Yeah. So I'm saying that what preying on the wisdom of Baba Sheikh Anta Diop, what differentiates a population from a nation is historical conscience. Okay, I hope ones appreciate that first and foremost, right up straight in at the thing. We have said earlier that a people without a historical conscience is a population. The difference being there's no organization there. The loss of national sovereignty and of historical consciousness following a prolonged foreign occupation engenders stagnation or even sometimes regression, disintegration, and the partial return to barbarism. Many people wonder why we focus on culture. Yeah, because culture is what informs ontology, understanding of the nature of self, cosmology, understanding of the nature of creation, and axiology, the primary principles and values that one's and communities adhere to in the development of themselves individually and collectively. All right. So we focus on the concept of culture and what culture is because it plays a key role in terms of social organization. Without it, we sometimes regress, we disintegrate, and we are in danger of returning to what is called barbarism. I hope ones and ones appreciate. Give thanks for those who are just coming through. Feel free to like up the video, share the link, and if you are moved to make a financial contribution to the works that I produce, hit up the PayPal link in the description. All right, continuing with Baba Sheikh Anta Diop. But then, what would we call an African history? We need to distinguish 2 levels. The immediate one of the local histories, so dear, deeply lived, in which the African peoples, segmented by diverse exterior forces, the principle of which is colonization, are shriveled up, find themselves trapped, and are vegetating today. So what he's saying is that to a large extent, we are, you know, products of a colonial experience. Our identities have been defined by our colonial experiences. So we are now things like Ivorian, and we are now Nigerian and South African, and Kenyan, and all of these identities that were drawn up, that are defined by borders designed and designated by Europeans. Yeah, but even deeper than that, even our so-called tribal designations. Another day we're going to go into the concept of neocolonialism and how tribe, the concept of tribe, is a colonial construct. Yeah, and so even our concept of tribes, segmented, disparate tribes that have no relation to each other, that have cultures that are irreconcilable, and result in perpetual warfare among African peoples, is a colonial idea. A colonial ideal that has been imposed upon us by our oppressors, and has in turn informed the extent to which we have been indoctrinated into the idea, has in turn informed how we identify ourselves. Yeah, and so we're segmented and shriveled up, and as a result, we're vegetating. We are unable to develop ourselves from our current position based upon our current understanding of ourselves, our current ontology, so to speak. All right. Continuing, a second level, more general, further off in time and space, and including the totality of our people, comprises the general history of Black Africa, insofar as research permits. Restoring it today from a purely scientific approach, each history is thus pinpointed and correctly situated in relation to general historical coordinates. Thus, all the continent's history is reevaluated according to a new unitary standard, suited to revive and to cement on the basis of established fact all of the inert elements of the ancestral historical mosaic. Baba Sheikh Anta Diop is presenting us today with a challenge. That challenge is to restore, going back a second, to restore historical conscience, and for the purpose of redeveloping national sovereignty. And he's saying that he's doing, in order to do so, we must bring together the shared commonalities of our people as a part of our lived experience. And he's also suggesting here, as he makes clear elsewhere in other texts, that we don't need to make this up. The fact that there is cultural unity in Black Africa is unquestionable. The fact that this cultural unity can be employed in order to develop a federated free state is without question, except for our dedication to that process, kings and queens. And so I want to now demonstrate how KIMOYO, African spirituality, presents the philosophical foundation and the cultural orientation to make this vision a reality. How culture and spirituality at the core of culture is the means through which, is the best means through which we can achieve this particular goal as laid down by Baba Sheikh Anta Diop and others in our history, kings and queens. Welcoming all those who are still coming through. I have started with this video for practically every presentation in order to lay a foundation for why we are here. And so we're going to go to the wisdom of Mama Marimba Ani, my spiritual mother, who we praise. There are not enough words in the English language to define the value of the work of Mama Marimba, and personally the impact that she has had on me and my development as a young African. I've been listening to this mama since I was a child, literally from me yai de me. And you know, we continue to feast upon her wisdom. So I hope ones and ones appreciate this.
African spiritual thought in its own terms. Okay, many of us are practicing other religions because we need something. That's a human need. That's an African need. And we're doing this because no one has ever presented African religion to us in terms of the underlying philosophy that the religion is based on. That is, no coherent statement has been made to us about African religion, and it hasn't been explained in terms of the African worldview. Usually it's explained with reference to somebody else's worldview. So I want to attempt to correct that this evening, and then we can get hopefully into questions.
So I keep playing this because I want to emphasize the fact that our view of our own spirituality and culture has been given to us by colonizers. And we therefore view our own spiritual traditions through the eyes of colonizers and oppressors. And therefore, we have a deficient understanding of our spirituality and our culture. So it's time, therefore, that we look at our spirituality and our culture from our own perspective, from our own worldview, based upon its own merits, and not based upon the assumptions, the presumptions, and the impositions of aliens and oppressive aliens at that. So the idea of the series is to present a philosophical understanding of Kimoyo, African spirituality, for those who are watching, for those who are listening, and hopefully to help to develop an understanding of the thing, but not only to develop an understanding of it, but to develop an inclination towards the evolution, the practical engagement in, and the utility of our culture and spirituality in our liberation efforts. Yeah, I hope that is clear for ones and ones. All right. So we're going to begin by setting the foundation, the tone for our presentation today by going into the Oduifa. Yeah, the Oduifa, for those who may not be aware, is a sacred wisdom enshrined in the Ifa tradition or the Isese tradition of the Yoruba. Okay, and so we're dealing with a bastion of sacred wisdom. Yeah. That comes through the Ifa tradition, that when you go for a divination, whoever is conducting the divination will seek to read the divination relating to the various different Odu. There are 16 primary Odu who are like ancient kind of primordial ancestors, yeah, who represent different principles in nature and creation, and who have various different wisdom associated with them. Yeah. And so this Odu is taken from the corpus as associated with Oturapon Meji. Yeah. And basically you get you understand why we're using this as a foundation for today's presentation. The link here is that last week we were dealing with ancestors and the forces of nature. So today we're going to situate the role of ancestors and ancestor veneration within a nation building agenda and the role that plays. And the Odu, according to Oturapon Meji, says it is the Ethiopian sparrow. Excuse me, because this will be much more beautiful if I was saying it in Yoruba, but my Yoruba is not up to scratch. We will get there, kings and queens. So we're just going to deal with the Anglais for now, and we're going to develop ourselves to be able to engage with the Yoruba at a later date. Ashe. It is the Ethiopian sparrow, which builds its own nest and puts its entrance face down in a curve. The nest neither touches the water nor touches the sky, but its entrance points down in a curve. This is the teaching of Ifa for Oyepolu, offspring of those who perform the ancestral rites of Ife, one whose mother left him all alone when he was very young. Thus, when Oyepolu grew up, He did not know all the rights of his ancestors. His life became chaotic. He sought a wife to marry, but could not find one. He did not have even a place he could call home. Then he took his situation under consideration and went to a babalawo. This is for want of a better terminology, it relates to the concept of priest, for advice. He was advised that it was because of his ancestral rights, which he had neglected, that he was in confusion. He was told to go to the graves of his ancestors and to pay homage and ask guidance. After he had done so, he started to enjoy his life. Yeah. And so we're setting the foundation for today's installment of the series. And the wisdom of the Odu, as encapsulated in this verse, suggests to us that disconnection from our ancestors will bring us pain. It will bring us confusion. It will bring us strife. And until we are able to return and reconnect to our ancestors, yeah, we will continue to experience that pain, that strife, and that confusion. Yeah. Oyepolu is experiencing this because of a disconnection from his mother, his earthly source in that regard. And so because of that, what naturally a mother would transmit to a child, he has not been able to inherit. And many of us as African people in this world are experiencing exactly this dynamic. We're disconnected from our mother, our earthly source, the source from which our ancestors developed culture, high culture, and deep thought, to quote Baba Jedi Shemsu Jehuti, also known as Jacob Carruthers. And so we were deliberately taken through a process called Ma'afa, which is defined in the Swahili as great disaster, and ripped from an understanding of our ancestral traditions. And as a result, the more we have become indoctrinated into the ideas, ideals, and culture of our oppressors, the more we remain confused, and the more we continue to experience strife and tribulation. And so we're going through the process now of going to the graves of our ancestors. Yeah, we're going through the process now of going to the graves of our ancestors, figuratively and literally, as the case may be. And so we are going to pay homage and ask for guidance, in the knowledge that when we do so, and when we begin to actualize and functionalize that guidance, we will begin to enjoy our lives. And when we say we and I and them thing there, we're talking now in the sense of the collective self, which we're going to get into shortly. So we're going to start by talking about the concept of the self. And this is giving an African-centered idea of what it means to be a person, a human being, a self. Yes, what is an individual? Is there any such concept as an individual within African consciousness? Let's go forward. We have feasted abundantly from the wellspring of the works of Baba Kimbwadende, Kiabun Seki Fukiao throughout the series. Today will be no different. Taken from the book Self-Healing Power and Therapy, Old Teachings from Africa, Baba Kimbwadende is defining the concept of Muntu. Yes, we haven't engaged in a linguistic breakdown of the terminology Muntu, except to say that the term Untu relates to the understanding of vital force again. And so the term Muntu gives expression to the fact that the human being is an expression, a particular expression of that vital force. Baba Kimbwadende says, in my previous works, I tried to explain the Bantu concept of the Muntu that we all are. This concept is diametrically opposite to that found in a mechanically oriented world. In a mechanically oriented world, a human being is conceived merely as a mechanical tool with decreasing value. He goes into more explanation, which I I haven't included in this presentation, but he breaks down the military and materialistic focus that we find in European society. And so because of that utilitarian focus, which is materialistic in fundamentally, once a person is less physically able, they become less valuable to the society. And this is not the case within the African worldview, as he will go on to explain. African society in general, and the Bantu in particular, perceive a human as a power. Yes, a phenomena of perpetual veneration from conception to death. Perpetual sorry, I've repeated that. A perpetual reality that cannot be denied, and more so after death, because this physical reality becomes a spiritually living reality in words, deeds, experience, image, and invisible radiating sun. Yes. So now, last week we were dealing with the forces of nature. Understand now that within this concept of the self is an expression of nature, more specifically, an expression of the sun. Yes. As such, a pregnant woman is perceived as the carrier of a new and holy package full of power and energy, a continuation genetically of old radiations. Yeah. So the newborn carries the old radiations under a new form. The entire community awaits the coming of the package, the infant or the muntu to be born. All right. It speaks for itself, so I'll move on. The death of a human being is perceived as the setting of a living sun in the lower world. Ku'mpemba. Yes, that's the lower world. The spiritual world, or the world of the ancestors, the community of the dead. The Bantu concept of a human being's influence upon the environment, society, and his fellow human beings is very clear. Nothing is isolated in the universe, visible or invisible. The sun always shines and we feel its warmth. Likewise, human beings, living or dead, as living suns, excuse my typo, rising and setting around the world, are all related to each other. The warmth of radiations never die at sunset, the physical death. Yeah. Case in point now, when we're talking about forces of nature, human beings are a force within nature. So we don't just understand that we have to be in harmony with nature. We understand that we ourselves are a force of nature. And so in being in harmony with nature, we find harmony within the self. Okay, I hope that's clear. All right. It is here that the misconstruction of the myth of the ancestors cult of Africa began in the Western literacy of Africa. African people do not worship the dead. Yeah, remember I'm laying the foundation from last week to this week. All right. Okay. They venerate Nsinga Dikanda Waning, the community's genetically bounding rope. Power. Yeah, so bear that in mind now. He's got genetically bounding rope, and in brackets power. That genetically bounding rope is itself seen as an expression of power, strengthened between the dead and the living. This renders perfectly alive the biogenetic history of the community. The dead represent a physical and spiritual reality present in the past as well as the living community today, in the process of shaping the direction of our physical and spiritual reality and presence in the future. So the idea is that not only must we be connected to the cosmos, but as manifestations and a force of the universe within our own selves, we must be connected to our unique manifestation of nature, which is Muntu, and the various different examples of Muntu that birthed us into existence. We must remain connected to that. Yeah. Because and in doing so, represent sorry, the ancestors are present, yes, in the past, as well as the living community today. Yeah. Why? In the process of shaping and the direction of our physical and spiritual reality and presence in the future. So it's our understanding of our history through our ancestors that gives us the proper understanding of the present in order to construct and represent and develop a more prosperous future. He goes on. Lusala luwa nuni yandi wam panolo. Birds have feathers because they were passed on to them by other birds. That sounds pretty basic, isn't it? Genetically, through birth, says the Congo proverb. Birds fly because they continue to perform their ancestors' art of flying well. Yes? So this is coming back to what was said in the Odu that we read earlier. Yes? The birds fly because their mama teach them how to fly. The Muntutu, being a living son, must know well who he is, what the content of his package of health is, and the pillar of his individual self-healing power, so that he might pass on that same package in his turn. So I raised reference last week to the concept of the rhythmic cycle of life. The African sees him herself as a part of a cycle, a spiraling cycle of life. And just as we are born, we have a responsibility to preserve and add to and evolve so that we can pass down to those who will be born of us. And the cycle continues, and the cycle continues. All right. So this is now, we've dealt with coming from the Kikongo tradition. This is a saying in the Zulu, which many of us will be familiar with. Now, bearing in mind that for those who are not particularly au fait, yeah, with the makeup of different African cultures. Now, you're finding the same word, muntu, in Kikongo as you are finding in the Zulu, because the languages are related, yeah? The Congo being in Central Africa and obviously the Zulu being in Southern Africa. I'm pointing that out because I want to emphasize the point. Throughout the series that we are dealing with cultural unity in Black Africa. We're dealing with shared concepts within the cultures, within the spiritual systems, yeah? So we're not dealing with these separate and distinct, irreconcilable spiritualities, so-called religions and cultures, okay? All right. The Zulu says, muntu, ungumuntu, ungabantu, which means a person is a person because there are people. The African concept of the self is conceived of in relationship to other people, in relationship to the universe as a whole. So the individual, the concept of an individual is, I don't want to say non-existent, but not primary within the African center of consciousness. The primacy is within collectivity, collectiveness, relationship, connectivity. Muntu, say it with me now. Muntu, ungumuntu, ngabantu. It's beautiful to get some African words on your tongue, kings and queens. A person is a person because there are people. This is an African-centered concept of the self. So the self now is conceived of as a radiating sun among other radiating suns. Yes? And so if you think of that within a cosmological understanding of planets, that planets revolve around suns. These various different suns are gravitated towards each other and revolving around each other in order to maintain order and balance within the cosmos and all of these things. Yeah? Moving on to a different concept now. Within ancient Kemetu tradition, yeah? Within ancient Kemetu tradition, you have the concept of the parts of the soul. Some say there are 7, some say there are 9. I've even seen 12. I've not seen the 12 quantified in such a way. Here, though, you see a brief breakdown of the different concepts that have come to light through studying of the Medunetta an area of study which I am yet to delve into in depth in terms of understanding and being able to break down the Mejanetta. I soon reach there, but me not there yet. But here I have brought together the work of Baba Naim Akbar and Baba George G.M. James. Yeah, Baba Naim Akbar in an essay entitled "The African Origin of," the title is slipped me, you know. It's gonna come back to me. It's gonna come back to me, yeah. But it's housed in a book called Egypt, Child of Africa, as put together by Baba Ivan van Sertima, yeah. And he commissioned Naim Akbar to do this paper on the African origin of psychology, okay. And so Naim Akbar began to explore these parts of the soul. Now he deals with 7, yeah. Baba George G.M. James deals with 9 in the book Stone and Legacy. I brought them together because I believe that Naim Akbar's definitions are more functional. However, because he deals with 7 or not 9, he misses out 2, yeah, which are the Shechem and the Ren. And I believe these 2 are very, very important for our modern day understanding of these things. And what Baba Naim Akbar is suggesting here is that when you look at what these 7 or 9 parts of the soul represent, and you look at the concepts behind them, what we have here is a model for mental health, because the well human being, the well muntu, is one who is balancing these different aspects of the self, who is aligning and properly placing and properly developing and relating to these aspects of the self. Yeah. So just to give but it should be said that a definitive definition or translation of what these concepts mean has not been done. This is work that is still being done. Yeah. But the point is that we are now developing, we are delving into the traditions of our ancestors and making them functional for our lives and our culture in today's world. So we have the car. I'm going to go through a few of them and explain why I've mixed it up in terms of the ones that Naim Akbar doesn't address and the reasons why I believe they're important. The car, which is probably the most popular one that many of us will know about, is the abstract personality of the man to whom it belongs, possessing the form and attributes of a man with power of locomotion, omnipresence, and ability to receive nourishment like a man in its equivalent. Yeah, it is equivalent to eidolon, i.e., image. Yeah, the Shechem. This is one of them now that Akbar doesn't address, doesn't deal with in his paper. Yeah, but it's the power or the spiritual personification of the vital force in a man. Its dwelling place is in the heavens with the spirits or the Kus. Now, when you see Kus, that relates to the concept of Ak or Aku, which is the ancestors, yeah? The ancestral spirits. And then you also have Huku, which are the damned, yeah? And I meant to make this point last week, so I'm gonna make it briefly right now. In Asian Kemetu cosmology, you have the Aku and then you have the Huku. The Aku are the blessed, the so-called, for want of a better terminology, they translate it as blessed dead. And you have the Huku, who are the damned, yeah, or the accursed dead. These are people that are either enemies or people within your own culture who have disrespected the culture and the civilization to such a degree that it has a degrading influence or could have a degrading influence. There's a category here for such people. And so when I'm making that point, because sometimes people say, well, how do you know what spirits you're calling on? When you're calling on these spirits, how do you know? Yeah, the African consciousness knows, okay? Because we know exactly what we are talking about, what we are saying, and who we are referred to. All right, so make that point very, very clearly. Okay, but the idea of Shechem as spiritual power, yeah, relates to the concept of vitalism for me, and the idea of power. I believe it's important, yeah, and so I think that it's a good thing to forward this concept of the self as a part of the self, Shekem, in that kind of way. I'll deal with one more, which is the Ren, yeah, which is another one that Baba Akbar doesn't address in his treaty of these concepts, but is in George J.M. James. And as you can see, the Ren is the name or the essential attribute for the preservation of a being. The Egyptians believe that in the absence of a name, an individual ceased to exist. Yeah, when I was growing up, and I'm yet to find exactly where he saw it, but my father used to always recite this saying that a person is not truly born until a Ren has been pronounced. Yeah, until their name has been pronounced. And so the idea of the Ren as a part of the soul is important for Africans in this day and age, principally because of one of the fundamental processes of the Ma'afa was to take our names from us and give us the names of our colonizers, our oppressors, to instill shame and symbolic degradation upon how Africans name and what Africans name ourselves, and elevate the naming traditions and the names of invaders and colonizers above our own. And so the Ren is important because it is the name that is called upon once you become an ancestor. You are known through your name. But in this day and age, it is a fundamental, I believe the artist is called Pablo Moses. Him have a song with name, "Take back your name and give I fear name." Yeah, so the reclamations of our names has been a fundamental feature, yeah, of African cultural resistance to oppression all around the African diaspora. And so this is an important concept also. But do further research, kings and queens, into the concept of the name, the Ren, and the 9 parts of the soul. I hope ones and ones understand this. Yeah. So basically, we're dealing now with mental health, and so the African conceives of the individual self itself in the context of community. The individual is made up of a composite of selves that have to be understood in order to achieve, sustain, and maintain mental health. Okay, this is forwarded now. We're going to go to the Handbook of Yoruba Religious Concepts as written by Baba Ifa Kadade, where he's now explaining. Remember last week when we were going through the concept of orisha, I said that the actual primary orisha of us all is our own ori. Yes, and so because we were going to deal with it this week, I didn't do it last week, but your ori is your first and primary orisha. What is your ori? You can see I'm pointing at my head. Ori, G Okem Yiwa and A Fundi state the word ori has many meanings, I should say. Literally, ori means head, similar to what ras means, yeah, in the Amharic, yeah, it means head. It means the apex of all things, the highest of any endeavor. In the human body, ori is divided into 2, the physical head and the spiritual head. The spiritual head is also subdivided into 2, the ori apari, the inner, internal, spiritual ori, and the ori ode, the physical head. Okay, so we're seeing now the reflection, yeah, of immaterial and material, invisible and visible. The ori inu, the internal spirit, and the iponri, the soul space of the inner self, are more noted definitions of the ori. It is revealed in the odu ogunda, back to the odu again, that no god blesses a person without consent of their ori. One whose ori has accepted the sacrifice is one who should rejoice exceedingly in all forms of ritual sacrifice. Offerings are first placed to the center or the top of the head. This is due to ori and the appeasement of the ori's divine nature. If you can see the image in the background, that's what's happening here. I was at an Oshun ceremony, and so we were giving offerings to the river. Before we give offerings offerings to the river. We place the offering on our head, either the forehead or the top of the head, again, to acknowledge our own Ori. Ori is head. Yeah. So it's head, but it's consciousness. Your Ori is your consciousness. So in the Ifa cosmology, your head and your consciousness is actually seen as an expression of spirit, a manifestation of spirit. Yeah. And the more we get into understanding Kimoyo, African spirituality, the more we realize that the concept, that the word spirit is insufficient, because it's the understanding of what that word would mean and the different things that we might translate as spirit in various different African languages. Let's say, for example, each of these 9 parts of the soul could be translated as spirit into English, but it's much more complex than that. And this is why it's very important to look at African spiritual systems on their own merits and not through the cultural lenses of aliens and invaders. Okay? All right. Orisha as a term is actually the combination of 2 words. Ori, which is the reflective spark of human consciousness embedded in human essence, and Sha, which is the ultimate potential of that consciousness to enter into, assimilate itself into divine consciousness. So within the self, we are, as our human bodies, and we are the Sha, yes, part of the Ori. Okay, the Ori operates within our bodies, our, you know what I'm saying, as a manifestation of nature. Yeah, within other aspects of nature, the Ori, the Sha is the river, or it's the fire, or it's the tree, or it's the deep ocean, or it's, you know, whatever it is. Yeah. Okay, but the point is that we're talking about consciousness made manifest within creation. The human consciousness needs to pass through stages of development in order to attain the highest levels. The Orisha symbolize the forces and forms of human divinity potential. In Her Back is a book that gives an explanation of initiation processes in ancient Kemet. Yeah, it is written that the Netters, divine beings, Orisha. So the Netters in ancient Kemet are the Orisha in the Yoruba. Yeah, are an expression of the principles and functions of divine power manifesting in nature. Their names and images, as pictured in the myths, define such principles and functions, and they are offered that the student may learn to know them and to seek them in him herself. This concept, maintained by the ancients of Egypt and West Africa, is evident, though somewhat dismissed, in all forms of religious and spiritual development. What's he saying here? Yeah, what is he saying here? He's saying that the understanding of the Orisha is not, as Dali and Adolfo we read from last week, yeah, in the book Ancestral Voices, we're saying that our understanding of the Orisha are signs and symbols for our own human self-development. In harmonizing with nature, we learn how to develop ourselves. And so this understanding of the self suggests to us that in nature itself is all that we need to develop the self. Yeah. Okay. The principles that we need to develop the self are derived from nature itself. But if Karate continues, the Yoruba maintain that worship of the Orisha assists in the development of Iwa Pele. Remember that terminology. Iwa Pele, or balanced character and balanced attitude. That the most important purpose of a person on earth is to become and exhibit that character and attitude. Religion as a custom of worship is not man's purpose. Yeah, the purpose is not the religion itself. Yeah, to know the one and only truly God. No, the purpose, but only a means to an end, while the end itself is Iwa Pele, balanced character. Thus, the fundamental reality in respect of the divinity of self and the heavenly forces is that of pure and enlightened character development. This is the premise of true orisha involvement. The connection between one's consciousness, ori, and one's behavior, iwapele, yeah, or pele, which is like character, yeah, is clearly seen as reciprocal and relative. That is, the more enlightened one's consciousness becomes in respect to the divine, the more one's behavior reflects the divine. Thus, the individual is deemed saintly or priestly in their development. I hope ones and ones are following the thing so far. I should say, if there are any questions, yeah, feel free to post them in the chat. I will get to them, and later on when I've finished, we will be opening up the lines for Q&A and discussion, challenge, you know, additions to the knowledge, because I'm sure there are many listening who know enough, yeah, who know enough and would like to add to, yeah. So we have iwapele, balance. This concept of balance is ubiquitous in African spiritual traditions. This relates to, last week we delved into the concept of, the week before we delved into the concept of ma'at. The concept of iwapele relates to the concept of ma'at. In self-healing power, Baba Kim Wadende, Kiabonseki Fukiao speaks to kinenga, which again is balance. Yeah. But then balance now, as we dealt with when we dealt with ma'at, balance is on the individual level, but it's also on the collective level. It's also on the cosmological level. Yeah. So the aim of life is to achieve balance on all of these various different levels within the self. Balance within the self is mental health. Yes, communal, social health is balance in the community. And universal health is balance with the cosmos at large. And you can see these concepts replicating themselves throughout African spiritual traditions. Yeah. So now we're going to pray on the wisdom of Baba Wade Nobles, who is what he's referred to as a black psychologist or an African-centered psychologist, who is developing on these traditions in a concept that he refers to as Saku gel. Yeah. And I'm still working on how to pronounce that D-G-A-E-R. But again, my measure soon come. Now, the book where he goes in on this is a book called Seeking the Saku, Foundational Writing for an African Psychology. These quotes are not necessarily taken from the book, but papers that relate to what is in the book, if that makes sense. So this particular first one is called Fundamental Task and Challenge of Black Psychology. He says, now what I'm detailing here is what I believe to be one of the primary functions of African spirituality, Kimoyo, in today's world, and that is the idea and the concept of mental health and mental wellness on the individual and the communal level. I am putting forward the idea that one of the primary functional roles that Kimoyo, African spirituality, has to serve us potentially in today's this day and age is the idea of psychology and well-being, mental well-being, okay, and developing of the consciousness. Baba Wade Noble says, the early 1970s saw the first introduction of African philosophy, as the grounding for a new black psychology. Noble's 1972. During the next 2 decades, several black psychologists joined in the excavation of ancient African ideas as grounding for the reemergence of a black psychology. Naim Akbar, 1994, which is what I was referring to earlier, correctly connected the stolen legacy of the Greek term psychology to the ancient African idea of Saku. To explain that a little bit further, it is being suggested, yeah, that the term Saku is actually the etymological root of the word psyche. Yes. Now, I cannot say that definitively, okay? because I have not actually seen a linguistic breakdown that substantiates that argument, right? But I'm just giving that explanation because that's the argument that Baba Naim Akbar makes. He doesn't demonstrate it, but he makes the argument. And so once I see the demonstration, then I will affirm that more with more conviction. I hope ones I appreciate that. Welcoming all those who are just coming through. Like up the thing, share up the link, and if you are so moved, hit up the PayPal in the description. The idea of Saku recognizes that a full understanding of reality acknowledges that spirit is the basis of all known and knowable phenomena and perceptions. As a part of this ongoing dialogue, in the late 90s, I introduced the concept of Saku Sheti stroke Gel. Noble was 1997, as a further refinement and deeper extension of the Black psychology's African essence. Saku means the understanding, the illuminator, the eye, and the soul of the being, that which inspires. And I'm able to correct myself here. When I was delivering this presentation on content over everything, I said that Saku is consciousness or spirit, yeah, or soul, relates to these concepts. That was because I was still in the mind of Naim Akbar, who makes that that translation. Really, Saku relates to a ritual whereby praise songs and praise poetry are bestowed upon the soul of a person. Yeah, it's a ritual, and so a ritual of illumination. Yeah, so really, Saku means understanding, illumination, the eye and the soul of the being, that which inspires. Okay, so we're just correcting ourselves from what we have previously said. All right, not on a run. All right, the concept of gel means to probe deeply and widely in examination, and by extension, engage in a profound and prolonged probing into oneself in order to understand and assert oneself and reality in the most dignity-affirming and expansive ways. Finally, the concept of sheti or shidi, yeah, means to save, to preserve, to recover, to rescue, to reserve, to dig, to remove, to pull, to recite, to keep safe, to break, to take away, to maintain, to exact, to collect, hand over, deliver, and to levy. Yeah. And so what Baba Wade Noble is suggesting is that both him and Naim Akbar are stating emphatically that Eurocentric psychology is insufficient as far as African people are concerned. One, because it comes from a flawed concept of the self, and two, because its methods of therapy do not speak to the African concept of self and reality, yes, of our experience and so on and so forth. In furthering the challenge of Black psychology, to rescue ancient African deep thought, I propose the adoption of Saku Jel as the process of understanding, examining, and explicating the meaning, nature, and functioning of being human for African people by conducting a deep, profound, and penetrating search, study, and mastery of the process of illuminating the human spirit or essence, as well as all human experience and phenomena. Yeah. Bearing in mind now, this is a function of African spirituality in general. This is not, oh, I'm sick, let me go and see a psychologist. Yeah. This agwan all the while. Yeah. So because because the focus on within African spiritual traditions is not worship per se, but self-development, and worship as a function of self-development, it provides us with frameworks second to none in terms of developing ourselves, realigning ourselves with purpose, mission, sustaining wellness, continuing to reevaluate wellness on the collective, the individual levels. Yeah, this is a constant process, it's a constant cycle. So we don't have to wait till something is wrong. Somebody gets sick in order to reassess and look at and find therapeutic means and so on and so forth. Yes, we do it when sickness does arise on the individual or the collective level. However, the process is always ongoing. And the rituals, which we're going to be going into a little bit later on, are designed for such a purpose. Yeah? I hope ones are feeling where I'm going right about now. So in developing these concepts, in reclaiming these concepts, in evolving them and institutionalizing them, we are able to reap the best of the benefits. Yeah. I am also offering the concept or notion of Saku Siji, yeah, as to represent the practice of Saku, consistent with the African idea of if it exists, it most assuredly is spirit. The Saku Siji, or the Saku practitioner, would be spirits, humans who are led by spirits, who read spirits, who seek help and protection from spirits, and engages in the salvation and nurturing healing of spirits by performing the Saku as it should be done. Okay. I am also offering the concept and notion of Saku Siji to represent the practice of, oh, I've said this already. Excuse me. Right. In the practice of Saku illumination, I further suggest the rescue of the ancient construction of Earth, Saku. And forgive me, my obviously. So Medjugorje is they didn't write with the vowels. So oftentimes we're guessing at what vowel should be there and how to pronounce these words, yeah? Which means doing illumination or performing the illumination as it should be done. Okay? All right. As a contemporary operationalization of this notion, Saku would mean to engage in deep, profound, and penetrating search, study, understanding, and mastery of the process of illuminating the human spirit and reality by 1, clarifying human definition, meaning, and resolute position, purpose in the world. Yes. 2, analyzing and describing the concrete human conditions that affect and influence our collective human development and consciousness. 3, prescribing and exciting solutions and actions that will free humanity from both material and spiritual degradation. And interestingly enough, a lot of what he's explaining here is also addressed in this book, Self-Healing Power and Therapy, Old Teachings from Africa, which we referred to earlier by Baba Kimoo, then the Kiabonseki Fukiao. It goes into a lot of concepts in terms of the environment. I am what I see, and I am what I hear, and all these things, and how what we see and what we hear contributes to our mental health, and how we can develop what we see and what we hear in order to maintain wellness, yeah, within the self. All right. Okay, I'm gonna skip this side. Yeah, I'm gonna skip all of this, yeah, so that we can move on. So we may come back to that in the Q&A or discussion period, okay? But to now ground that understanding of the self, yeah, let's go back to the sacred Odu. The reading according to Eji Ogbe says, daylight does not endure beyond its usual time. Night does not last beyond its regular time limit. And darkness does not continue beyond what is customary. He who provides a pair of sandals for a child's feet interpreted the teachings of Ifa for Balejo, who was coming from heaven to earth. If we have a problem, we should take it to our ancestors. He will protect us. Our paternal ancestors will never desert us. She will protect us. Our maternal ancestors will never neglect us. They will protect us. Our Ifa teachings will never forsake us. It shall protect us. Our Ori, our inner head, will not abandon us. This is here for the focus on the ancestors and Ori. Okay? Ori being our first port of call, but then you go to your ancestors next. All right? And then you go to the Orisha. Yes? Or the Orisha beyond one's own Ori. Okay? So let's deal with ritual. And this is going to be the quickest section. Then we're going to get into some stuff in relation to, actually, it's not going to be the quickest section. So as we go into the ritual stuff, we're going to be dealing with the nationhood stuff. Okay. I've got about half an hour left. Yeah, 20 minutes, half an hour. And then we're going to go in. All right. And make sure this thing is functioning proper. Make sure everything are going good. Kings and queens, just give me a signal if you can hear. I want to make sure that everything is functioning correctly. Yeah, somebody who's listening, just let me know that you can hear me properly and everything are streamed proper. I think you can, yeah. So I'm going to continue. I was just checking something because it looked like the internet did stagnate. All right. Okay. So we're going to pray on the wisdom of Mama Rimba Annie again. African life is replete with ritual. It states interrelationship with other beings in the universe. Ritual sacrifice symbolizes the principles of interdependence and reciprocity. It is through ritual that the unexplainable is understood. I love that, you know. It is through ritual that the unexplainable is understood, that chaos is made to be ordered within the logic of tradition. It is through ritual that trauma is avoided, crisis dealt with and overcome, and difficult transitions are perceived as passages between stages of normal growth and development. Universally, in ritual, the African combines life with artistic expression. Ritual is, in a sense, the ultimate philosophical expression of the African worldview, for it is the modality within which the unity of the human and the divine is expressed, in which the unity of spirit and matter is perceived, and in which the eternal moment is achieved. African ritual is all designed to reinforce our interconnectedness with all things in the universe. Yeah, that's what she's given expression to here. Not only all things in the universe, but all things in the universe at all time and in all space. Yeah, within the universe. And so to give expression of this as we delve into ritual as a central focal point within a nation building agenda, we're going to pray on the wisdom of me Pupa, my father, brother leader Mandaka, speaking at the Messiah opening ceremony. I forget which year. All right. But listening, kings and queens, and I hope ones and ones can appreciate and understand this. Okay. All right. Hold on there.
But when we engage in our African rituals restore the naturalness and the divinity of African being.
Give me a signal if this is coming through clearly, okay? Give me a signal if it's coming through clearly or if it's not. Oh, Charlie.
But when we engage in our African rituals restore the naturalness and the divinity of African being. Are you all with me, brothers and sisters? It is very empowering. It's very empowering. And by nature, by order of being, it's simply, brothers and sisters, exorcises the European spirit, if we can call it that, the European demon in us. It exorcises that. We are here to honor the life and legacy of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey. And every year we, within the Al-Kebel and Revivalist movement, call the community together to have this opening ceremony of Thanksgiving, to bring us together as an African communal family, to bring us together as an African nation. See, we must understand every nation does this. Every nation does what this does. It feeds the national consciousness. It shapes and feeds and directs the national consciousness of a people. So we call the community together. We come together as a communal family, but we also come together as a nation. And understand a nation is a people organized as a sovereign entity. A sovereign entity, meaning a sovereign entity is an entity that's empowered by its own agency. It's an empowered entity. And that's what we're striving to rebuild. That's the principle that underpins coming together for this Messiah opening ceremony. But we also designed this ceremony to synchronize our consciousness, synchronize our thoughts as a community and as a nation. Because that's what culture does. It synchronizes the thought process and thought patterns of a people. In the rituals, in the ceremonies, they reiterate and reinforce certain values. And in so doing, they create, and as I said before, reinforce a national consciousness. That's what we're trying to do here, because we realize that national consciousness with culture at its center is the vital prerequisite for nation building.
Yeah, so I hope the ones that understand that, kings and queens. When you engage in collective ritual, the primary focus of this is to synchronize consciousness. And this is not something that is unique to Kimoyo, African spirituality. Every culture, society, community, religion does this. Yes, that the values of the culture are encapsulated within ceremonies and rituals that are focused on at certain times of the year, which reinforce those values and principles, and therefore continue to synchronize the consciousness of the people. And you know the consciousness is in synchrony because the people them are doing all the same thing them. Yeah, in Western society, come November, everybody start to them, you know, going on some Christmas vibration. You're going to shop them and everything, you know, look red and green with a little white all over the window, all them something there. Yeah, because this society is synchronized around particular rituals at particular times of the year. And so all of these things reinforce cohesiveness among the people, and that is what ritual in African spiritual systems is designed to do. The difference is, however, that our spiritual conceptualization gives principles and values that are connected to nature itself, the cosmos itself, and the community itself as an expression or a force within nature. So we're going to give now some expressions and examples of everything that Brother Leader Mbandaka has just said, but principally looking at our African spiritual retentions in the Americas. We have focused quite significantly and rightly on the traditions that are still manifesting on the continent. And I've touched on here and there that how we've retained them and developed them and evolved them in the Caribbean and in the Americas. But I want to focus on that a little bit more now, principally because the Ma'afa was the process of denationalizing, African people, removing our national sovereignty and our historical conscience, as Baba Sheikh Anta Diop was speaking about earlier, as we read from. And so what I want to make clear is that through African spirituality, through Kimoyo, in the African diaspora, Africans found the wherewithal, whilst they were trying to destroy African peoplehood, to reform and retain and evolve African peoplehood as a functional agent in maintaining African communities and also revolting against the oppressor. Okay, I want to make that very clear this evening. So taken from an essay, which is found in a book called Victorian Jamaica. This essay is written by a sister by the name of Diane M. Stewart. It's entitled Kumina, a spiritual vocabulary of nationhood. Listening, kings and queens. I'm soon done. Olabi Yai theorizes that the specific nation practices of African descendants in Western diasporas, offering a promising foundation for future studies of Africana culture and consciousness. His conclusion is that, quote, in the Americas, Africans had to invent new institutions within which they could cultivate their customs and perpetuate the memory of Africa, and thus live a meaningful life. My Spanish not up to par, right? It says Cabildos de Nación, yeah, in Cuba, which were associations of Africans based on cultural affinities, Afro-Catholic lay brotherhoods and sisterhoods in Brazil, and more importantly, religious institutions such as Candomblé in Brazil, Santeria in Cuba, Kumina in Jamaica, and the African American Church in the United States are prominent instances of such invented institutions. Stay with me, kings and queens. It will all become clear in a minute. Yai is on point when he includes Kumina in his thesis, because mirroring social organizational patterns of their kin in the visible world, quote, the African gods are from tribes and nations. Yes, so deity in the African spiritual tradition is a cohesive force for nationhood. All right. This unnamed informant went on to explain to anthropologist Joseph Moore the significance of Manuka Vola and the definitive nations comprising the Kumina community. If you're not understanding what Kumina is yet, stay tuned, but it's all going to be explained. All right. Take Manuka Vola. He is a great ancestral spirit who now is so strong, he becomes a strong earthbound god, small g, of the whole Congo nation. There are 5 divisions or groups in the Congo nation. We've got Moyenge, who, Manuka Vola serves, since he is the head of this group. We got Machunde, we got Congo, we got Mondogo, we got Mumbaka, unquote. Honored as tribal head and renowned for his raid-making abilities, Manuka Vola, or Manuka Mvula, yeah, for those who know the name, the artist Laura Mvula, yeah, we recognize that name, hailed from Morant Bay. He was established in Johnston, an area near Duhani Pen, when he died in 1928 around the age of 80. This celebrated ritual specialist most likely assumed the leading role in Kumina ceremonies among later generations of liberated Central Africans who took residence in post-emancipation Jamaica. For Vola is remembered as a very old African born in Africa. Yeah, so basically what we're explaining here now, we're going to go to our ritual in a second, but Kumina is a tradition that is African spiritual retention in Jamaica, and the Kumina community is constructed off of the names of great ancestors who formed nations that are associated with our people in the Congo, among the Bakongo people. Yeah, I hope ones are appreciating that at the minute. Okay, all right. And so that connectedness, yes, the Kumina people of this day now, they refer to themselves as African or Congo people or Bongo people, yeah. And this is mostly concentrated in St. Thomas in Eastern Jamaica. Ironically, not ironically, interestingly, St. Thomas is the primary place where the founding fathers of Rastafari all come out of. Yesterday, yeah, was my son's birthday. Raskundi Sai Chenzila Takuma Amaru Mashanini Payambandaka. But the reason why he has Ras as a title in his name is because he shares the birthday of Baba Leonard Percival Howell, who is one of the founding fathers of Rastafari, coming out of St. Thomas. So when you hear the Rastaman say, Manak bongo, nati Congo, bingi bongo aya, where you get that from? Yeah? Where you get that from? Now you know where you get that from. All right? So stay with me, kings and queens. Yeah? Stay with me. I beg you, stay with me. All right? This is what you see on your left is what is called a cosmogram. Yeah. So you heard me refer to the Ku'umpemba earlier, which is the invisible realm, the spiritual realm. Then you have the Ku'unseke, which is the visible realm, the realm that we are all existing on in this plane of existence. And what you see on the outside circle are stages of human development. Yeah. And so we're going to explain that. And I should say that the Kenga loosely translates as cosmogram, and in this part of the essay, Diane M. Stewart is actually developing on the work of Baba Kim Wadende. Yeah, so we're seeing the connections here. All right, the cosmogram, the Congo cosmogram, the Kenga Congo, allows us to map aspects of the Kumina devotees' foundational sense of the cosmos, family, and nation in Africa and Jamaica. Congo people's perception of the world might be described as cyclical and spiral, as I've been saying the whole series. Their understanding of life and the humans being Muntu, life journey, is informed by reflection of the nature of the cosmos, deities, power, and planetary formation. The human being is also conceived as a microcosm of the entire cosmos, and the spirit medicines, Minkisi, available to humans for the management of life are manufactured for the energies of fundamental planetary life forms, animal and plant, human and material. Thought to develop across 4 life stages: Musoni, Kala, Tukula, and Lovemba, whose essential significance are mapped in symmetry with 4 movements of the sun. Remember earlier we said that the human being in the Kikongo tradition is perceived of as a radiating sun, a living sun. Yeah. Moments of the sun, stations across time. In each stage, the human being takes a different shape, completing a life cycle by the end of the 4th stage. When diagrammed, the Dikenga Congo is a spherical image divided evenly into 4 quadrants by vertical and horizontal axes. Yeah, distinguished by symbolic colors. Each quadrant represents one of life's 4 principal stages. The unborn, yellow, lower right, yeah, yellow, yeah, as you can see at the bottom, yeah, which is Musoni. Childhood, upper right, which is black, as you can see, is color. Adulthood, yeah, upper red, so upper left, which is red, as you can see, that's to color. And ancestorhood, lower left, as you can see, that's Lovemba, which is white. It follows that in addition to the healing practices, birth, marriage, and death, the customary rites of passage are all dignified by ceremonial behavior within Kumina families. Yeah? All right? I'm going to come back to it. Pursuing the counterclockwise path of the rising and setting sun during Kumina ceremonies, devotees dance in this perceived spherical circumference while twisting and turning their bodies in spiral patterns. As they make their way around the cycle, they travel through the 4 stages of life. Yeah, the image of the Kenga Congo is a visual vocabulary of Kumina devotees and other Congo people's orientation to life, ontogeny, and a universe populated by diverse beings and creative powers. The graphic portrait of the Congo cosmology conveys the idea that death is a doorway to continue life in the invisible lower world, where 2 phases of the life cycle unfold as the human being takes her or his ancestral and unborn shapes. A normative expectation then is that one will re-enter the life cycle and travel the Nseke, upper physical world, path of transmitting one's debt to humanity, or, sorry, 4, which a plethora of initiating institutions prepares each muntu. Yeah. All right. You know what? Let me pause here and give you an example of exactly what we are talking about right now. Right. And forgive me because I intended to prepare this from before and just forget for line up the video. So hold tight, kings and queens. Yeah. While I'm getting this up, I want to make it clear that we're dealing with a historical continuity here. So if I had more time, or I would have added into this presentation the role that Obia, or more importantly, Mayo, played in the Taki, Taki's rebellion. All right. This is a good book on that subject. It's called Taki's Revolt, the story of an Atlantic slave war. Yeah. Maybe in the discussion, I'll read an excerpt from this. Yeah. But in 1760, the biggest anti-slavery rebellion in the Americas prior to Haiti was waged and led by an ancestor by the name of Taki. And as a result of that rebellion, the practice that became known as Obia was banned, and it became punishable by death to practice Obia because of its role in the development and the organization of Taki's war, in Jamaica. We know about the story of Haiti and the role that Voodoo tradition played there. I'm not focusing on that because that's the one that we often go to. But in there's a tradition called Mayo, which then became known as, to summarize, in some instances became known as Obia. And so because the Europeans, enslavers, refer to all African spiritual traditions as Obia, all of our spiritual traditions became known as Obia, and they were all banned and became punishable by death. Yes, because of the fact that the so-called priests, the Obia man and the Obia woman, them were provided a indispensable organizing function and what's the word? Oath-taking ceremonies were conducted by these priests and priestesses before the war was waged. And whereas there were different divisions among Africans on the various different plantations for whatever different reason, they somehow were able to find unity under the banner of the Mayo or the Obia man Uman in terms of waging this war. So it was a cohesive unit. And as I've already explained, the tradition, because the deities of the tradition reference nations and communities, this is one of the reasons why it became an organizing force, because they have social power. The deities have social power, kings and queens. Yeah? And that replicates itself not only in Jamaica and Haiti, but in Antigua as well, because there's a Taki from Antigua as well. Yeah? You understand what I'm saying? All right, we have to know all them something here. So I'm going to give you an example of what I've just explained. Yeah, and it's not the best example, but it's probably the one that you're going to be able to most clearly see. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen now again. Yeah, to present this thing properly. I hope ones are with I. As we go. No, that's the wrong thing, man. All on the kings and queens. All on there. All on there. I'm coming. I'm forwarding, as the case may be. All right. Not everybody would have got that joke there, but it's all good. Okay. All right. So what you're seeing is a stage dramatization of Kumina by the Jamaican folk singers. Yes, it's an on-stage reproduction of Kumina. So you can see the spiraling dance that is being done. Yeah, and then you're going to see now the counterclockwise movement. Yeah, so this is everything I've just explained. Now you can see the drummers in the middle. Yes, the drummers in the middle on either side. One representing the November, which is going into the ancestral realm. one representing the color, yes, which is coming into the physical realm, yeah. Oftentimes on either side you'll have perpendicular, yes, to the two drummers. You have on one side at the top there somebody playing a shaker, and opposite them somebody playing a grater, yeah, which would be representing the Tukala and the Musoni, yeah. And you can see the ritual. So now the ritual of spiraling now is representing life, death, rebirth, all over and over again. Spiraling movements, yeah. So that's the ritual. That's the basics of the ritual. And then you have all kind of chant and all them something that will be done. Yeah, like this one. Kumina to kumina. Lande kumina. Yeah? I was going to give you an explanation. So I hope ones appreciate what I've just said there, yeah? Now, in the earlier presentation, I made reference to the fact that in the Dogon tradition, when there's a mask dance that's done, and on the mask, at the top of the mask, there is a symbol that represents Amma, yes, and that similar movement, yeah, that similar spiraling dance around a common axis is done, but they spread their arms out and spiral and around their own axis and around the axis in the center, and it represents Amma, which is a deity in that tradition, in the Dogon language, spreading Amma's essence to all creation in order to create creation. So you can see again that cultural unity, that cultural understanding, yes, that is being developed. Okay, and so the point here is that Africans, through Kumina, people reduce Kumina to a dance tradition. No, Kumina is a spiritual tradition that gives expression to African nationhood, that organizes people along nationalistic lines, whereby our people have our own king and queen, yes, within the Kumina tradition. So when I deal with King George and Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, no, is it? For we own a king and queen we are dealing with, yeah. I hope ones overstand. I'm not going to press the point any further for the sake of time, but I will come back to anything pertinent in the Q&A as is necessary. Okay, all right, so we're going to get back to this. Right, this focus on the Congo cosmology introduces the significance of reincarnation as a repeating yet even temporal process. Ancestors reincarnate within their genealogical lineages. They also reincarnate temporarily in the bodies of their descendants at ritual ceremonies. The center of the cosmogram, where the horizontal and vertical axes cross, symbolizes the unity of Muntu and Unkuyu, messengers of Nzambe Mpungu, the Congo high god, yeah. And you can see this line in the center says Kalunga. Remember in the first presentation we spoke about Kalunga, which is opposite worlded, sorry, the first presentation, the second presentation, yeah, opposite worlded forces, yeah, complete and together. Okay, the devotees, invisible family members and national leaders. As Joseph Moore observed during the 1950s, in Kumina, the key power source is either a black cloth with a white cross or on it, or the center post of the dancing booth, around which a ring, which signifies the area of power, is drawn. Yeah. Now, the unity between the invisible and the visible members of the Kumina nation is known to be real and efficacious through what Kumina custodians call Mayo spirit manifestation. Mayo, I mentioned earlier, so bear in mind now that the ancestors from Central Africa buck up on the ancestors from West Africa in the Caribbean, and these traditions became merged and evolved. So Mayo was dominant under Taki. Kumina became dominant under Paul Bogle in the latter part of the 1800s. Okay, but the terminologies were evolved, yeah, and synchronized with each other. Okay, a multisensory phenomena of cohabitation and communicative acts intended to nourish, heal, and sustain the entire communal nation. So we're emphasizing now that the ritual is designed to restore cohesiveness to the nation itself. Yeah, to restore cohesiveness to a nation under the extreme conditions of enslavement, the destruction of culture. Yes, and post-enslavement, the economic suppression, and really what was basically continued enslavement in the Caribbean during that time, little as it's known. Yeah, to seek guidance and holistic health resources. Although graphic representation of the Congo cosmogram, often drawn with white chalk, are common features across African heritage religious cultures in the Caribbean and the Americas, this ideograph is inscribed more conventionally through the collective circumambulatory and exaggerated spiraling dances commonly devotees perform during these ceremonies. So the dance itself became symbolic of this concept, yes, and the reinforcement of this concept. In Jamaica, the communal nation did not become accustomed so much to drawing or etching the Kenga Congo, for instead, nation dances configured this corporeal cosmogram at every ceremony. Beyond cultivating family bonding and nation building practices, Kumina emerged in Jamaica as a ritual site for kinesthetic philosophical inscription. Yeah. So now Paul Bogle happens, and the Kumina people then become the cohesive force. Yeah, around which the people are organized, and the oath, because they knew they were going to war, and so the oath taking ceremonies were done by people in the Kumina tradition. Although Paul Bogle himself was not considered to be a part of the specific Congo nation, because Africans did hold on to their various different nations, and he was one of the ancestors of people that were born in Jamaica, whereas a lot of the Bakongo people them were brought into Jamaica in the 1800s. Yeah, but he was embraced by the Congo nation and is remembered by the Congo nation today. There are songs dedicated to the Paul Bogle by the Kumina nation in Jamaica today. So we're talking about now again the rhythmic cycle of life, and how African spiritual ceremony and ritual is designed to give expression and synchrony to the rhythmic cycle of life. I won't go into this anymore because of time. Kem Shekem. So in Akan tree, we have the concept of Abibitumi, which is black power. Okay, black power. Now in the Kemetu, as an initiate of, and if I had more time, as an initiate of the Sima Keme Smaitawi, what you might know as yoga system, we could go into the each posture and the breath, and how each posture signifies a deity, and so healing and reflection within the movement and the posture comes through the principles that are associated with the divinity. Yes, if I have more time in discussion, I'll go into that. But my teacher, Master Basu Ankh Aku, develops this concept called Kem Shekem. And he says he wanted to understand, he wanted to delve into how our ancestors would have conceived of black power. Kem meaning black, Shekem meaning power. One of the parts of the soul that we referred to earlier that refers to as power. Mama Rimba Ani gives us a concept of Ma'at Ma'afa Sankofa. Without going into this too deeply, the whole point is that we are in a state of Isfet, which is the opposite of Ma'at. If Ma'at is truth, Isfet is lie. If Ma'at is life, Isfet is death. If Ma'at is order, Isfet is disorder or chaos. Yeah. If Ma'at is balance, Isfet is imbalance. Okay. We have been brought into a state of Ma'afa because of Isfet, because of the process of Ma'afa. And so what we need to engage is a process of Sankofa. Yes. The Akan word, which means going back to fetch. Yes. What we have lost in order to restore Ma'at. In order to restore Ma'at, we must have a vision of wellness, an example of wellness, as Mama Marimba Ali teaches us, an archetype of wellness. And that archetype of wellness is to be found in our original traditions, in our original cultures, in Kimoyo, our original spirituality, our original spiritual systems. So we go into our spiritual systems, we find our visions of wellness, our ideals of wellness, and we begin to institutionalize them. Marcus Mosiah Garvey said, the prophet said, God is universal intelligence, and man and woman are a unitary part of that universal intelligence. He also says nature first made us what we are, and then out of our own creative genius we make ourselves what we want to be. Mind creates, and as much as we desire in nature we can have through the creation of our own minds. Being at present scientifically the weaker race, you shall treat others only as they treat you. But in your homes and everywhere possible, you must teach the higher development of science to your children, and be sure to develop a race of scientists par excellence. For in science and religion, religion and science lie our only hope to withstand the evils, designs of modern materialism. Last week we began with the word sounds of the prophet, because that was the anniversary, the 80th anniversary of his passing. Why has he said science and religion? Because, kings and queens, I don't believe that science exists in a vacuum devoid of culture and cultural influence. And so because of the philosophical foundation that we get from our spiritual traditions, it directs the usages for our scientific exploration, our scientific discovery, and what we develop out of our scientific understanding. An understanding of the universe as spirit and ourselves as a part of the universal order is a deterrent from objectifying the universe and thereby destroying it with the mentality of conquering the universe, which is an ideal that is essentially born out of a Greco-Roman understanding of gods and divinity. Yeah, they were always in conflict with nature, whereas the African seeks to harmonize with nature. And so for the African conceptuality, it cannot be scientific if it destroys nature. Yeah, I've meditated on this quite a bit, why he says religion and science. In religion and science lies our only hope to withstand the evils of modern materialism. We must develop ourselves scientifically, but in developing ourselves scientifically, we must not use our spiritual consciousness. We must not be consumed by what this society applies science to, which is technology and the accumulation of technology. More could be said on that, but we're going to that another time. So, kings and queens, within Kimoyo African spirituality, we find the correct philosophy through which we can reconnect with our cosmic and earthly cultural source. Within Kimoyo African spirituality, it carries the innate philosophical framework that enables us to reconstruct an African culture that informs nation building. Within African spirituality, Kimoyo, we find the wherewithal, the correct way of life that will guide us in the restoration and rebuilding of institutions that will serve our people. And finally, kings and queens, we don't get involved in religion for religious sake, so we can float, and elevate and sit down and breathe and, transcend to the stars and the moon. That's well and beautiful. But we must remember that Kimoyo African spirituality is a revolutionary endeavor. If our spirituality is not contributing to us being able to shake off the shackles of mental, physical, and spiritual slavery, then we need to evolve it in ways that allow it to do so. Yeah? We don't want to take the politics away from the spirituality and the spirituality away from the politics. If our spirituality is not serving us politically and economically, it is insufficient. And from the African conception, if our economics and politics is not serving us spiritually, it is also insufficient, kings and queens. That concludes today's presentation. I hope ones and ones have got something from it. I do appreciate ones and ones tuning in and joining in. Give thanks, kings and queens, for everyone who has joined me for the entirety of the 4-week period. I'm going to stop there and open up the chat for questions, conversation, challenges, and all these things. All right. So let me post the link in the chat. Greetings, brother Tristan Samuels. It's a pleasure to have you join me, my brother. For those who may not be aware, if you're not aware of brother Tristan, just follow him wherever I am there. Yeah, he is a Medunetta scholar. Okay, so you heard me say earlier that I'm yet to master the Medunetta, to delve into it in terms of expertise and studying these things, which is something that I will be doing in the future. But our brother Tristan Samuels is already on that road, and expertly doing so. So I encourage ones and ones to check out these scholars, because them give enough inspiration still. So I am humbled by your presence, my brother. Grateful and thankful that you've taken the time to join. Kings and queens, the link is in the chat. The link is in the chat. Yeah, the link is in the chat. Yes, brother, I enjoyed the Kumina piece immensely as well, and I could go into more on the Kumina. And one day we might just do a presentation on the Kumina alone, because Kumina is very serious business. You know what I mean? So yeah, kings and queens, the link is in the chat. If you want to come through and join me, ask a question, make a comment, challenge me, add to. Yeah, I'm welcoming those who want to add to, because I don't know everything. Yeah, and I don't pretend to know everything. So we want to add to what is being expounded upon here. Please feel free to do so. Bigging up once again my sister Wahid Ism in the chat. Wahidism is a member of Afrocentricity International, and I do encourage ones and ones to check out Afrocentricity International. Under the most active channel that I know of is the one AI Philly, yeah, AI Afrocentricity International Philly, the chapter coming out of Philadelphia. Once again, my sister, I'm humbled and thankful for you joining. Once again, the link is in the chapter. Yes, and if I was not doing brother Obadele's Cambon's tree classes right now, I would be doing brother Tristian's Medunetta class. I've been looking for a Medunetta teacher. My spirit does connect with brother Tristan. I don't mind saying that publicly, quite extensively in this particular endeavor. And so I will be doing that class at some point, bro. So keep it going. When we're ready, may I come. But yeah, I'm one thing at a time in it. Yeah, we have a son and the money not enough. You know what I mean? So once I get through the tree, then we'll get into the Medunetta. All right, kings and queens. There's enough things that we could expound upon. Whilst ones and ones are coming through, I do want to just so fabricate the thing. I'll just read a section from this book in relation to Obeah, yeah, and its role in Jamaica during the Taki's war, Taki's rebellion. All right. So if you want to come through, click the link in the chat, click it, follow the prompts, and it will send you through. Like out the video as you hear, kings and queens. If you're not subscribed to our channel, feel free to do so. And there's also a PayPal link for those who want to contribute financially. Many people have been asking me about that. So throughout the presentation, throughout the series, I've had that link there for those who would like to make a contribution, and I are grateful for those who do so. All right. So reading from the book Taki's Revolt by Vincent Brown, yeah, he says transformations on the Gold Coast had taught Africans in that region to find ways of uniting competing factions to achieve common interests and to oppose the depredations of common foes. Yeah, bear in mind. So my master Basu is in the building. Yeah, who I referred to earlier. I was gonna give them an expose, Netta Ankh, in relation to becoming Asar. Yeah, I was dealing with the rituals because of time. I didn't go into the ritual of Smaitawi, but in the Q&A maybe I will do so. Yeah, So if the spirit moves you, feel free to come in and add to that the explanation of that ritual and what that means. Okay, but anyway, to oppose the differentiation of common foes. Now, bear in mind that this unification of different people groups, began on the continent. It didn't begin in the Americas. All right, I want you to know that. Okay, whether Akwamu, Asante, or the empires of Europe, these coalition building strategies relied in the Americas, as they had in Africa, on collective promises consecrated by oaths, which secured bonds of political alliance for immediate purposes. One might see these oaths as an indication of ethnic similarity among people who shared cultural understanding of the material and the supernatural enforcement of sanctions. At the same time, however, the oaths were crucial to forging bonds of alliance precisely because the coalitions were so fragile. Ethnic affinity was an insufficient basis for military order. Thus, where the British had their articles of war, a code of law read out as an incantation, the Cromantes, the Africans, had their solemn oaths. Insurgents could be united by beliefs in spiritual wisdom of ritual specialists and the invulnerability supposed to be conferred by sacred spells, and in the honor of fellow conspirators. Obeah practitioners helped the rebel bands to solidify their unions. The 18th century historian Edward Long described Obeah as, quote, a sort of witchcraft of most extensive influence. The authority which such of their old men as had the reputation of wizards or Obeah men possessed over slaves was sometimes very successfully employed in keeping them in subordination to their chiefs. The conspirators called, that's unquote, the conspirators called upon the shamans to use their charms to protect them from bullets and to administer the binding pledges. Spiritual counselors were crucial to rebel politics. So again, the Obeah men and women were attacked by the colonial authorities because of the organizational function that they played among the people. And there are other areas in the book that give greater expression to that. It don't look like nobody want to come through and talk to I want to go on. Me I scare you no? I'm not scared of the voodoo and the Obeah. You know what I'm saying? No problem, Netta. No problem. No problem. And I give thanks for your encouragement and appreciation. Feel no obligation. It's just you know what I mean, a suggestion, just a suggestion. Yes, kings and queens, the link is in the chat for anybody who wants to come through and ask a question. Oh, by the way, Caleb did say he had a question, so I wonder if he's asked it already. Has he asked it already? Look like him go back and forth with Brother Christian. My two questions are: what is the connection between ancient Egypt and West Africa? What does the word Ethiopia mean, varying from claims for this one? And what does Habasha mean in Arabic? So yeah, I was gonna say Brother Christian might so what's the connection? There are many connections. It is considered that the Nile Valley became a hub, for groups across the continent. The Nile Valley, the Nile being the longest river, and ancient civilizations formulating along rivers, makes the Nile Valley a primary place for a confluence, of different cultures from across the continent that migrated to the Nile Valley from different areas. Bearing in mind that the Nile itself, covers a massive expanse of land. Bear that in mind. Okay, so Kemet is just one aspect of the Nile Valley. All right, let's bear that in mind. So when we talk about Kemet, we're not talking about an individual tribe of people, but at different points, just as people migrated to the Nile Valley, they migrated from the Nile Valley. And culturally, linguistically, for example, I mean, Diop and Fifalabenga began the work in relating the Nile Valley languages to languages like Wolof and these kinds of things. More work is being done on that in this stage. Because the discipline of so-called Egyptology had a lot of work in taking Kemet out of Africa, and principally they have done this by relating and comparing the culture of Kemet to every other culture apart from the other cultures within Africa. Yes, and so we're beginning to throw off those shackles right about now. And so one of the more obvious ones is many people relate the divinities of the Yoruba cosmology, the orisha, to the Neteru. And when you go into those systems, you can find a lot of the similarities. There are many oral traditions that speak of many of the groups from West Africa coming from, or parts of the groups from West Africa coming from the east, from the Great Water, and migrating to the West and meeting people in the West and forming new people groups and nations whilst they were there. And that work is also still being done. There are many different symbols that can be found, like the Ankh in the Nile Valley is likened to the Ekwaba, yes, in the Akan tradition. Apparently, even the cowrie shell comes from East Africa. Yeah, apparently, even the cowrie shell comes from East Africa and was imported into West Africa. But these are all frontiers for further research, and more things are coming to light where these things are concerned. However, linguistics is the arena that gives me the most excitement because of the role that language plays in a culture, and the fact that we are not only learning of the cultures that come from out of Kemet and the Nile Valley, but also the cultures that informed Kemet and the Nile Valley. You know what I'm saying? There were traditions that are older than Kemet, yeah, and Nubia, that informed Kemet and Nubia. And I hope you understand when I say right there. So, all right, okay, looks like I got a guest. Brother Christian, you there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, me can't hear you, kid.
Yeah, me there. Thank you for having me. I
right,
appreciated the invite.
Yeah.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but it's like your audio is in front of your visual, so it's like your visual is delayed. So yeah, but yeah, it's like, but why aren't you?
No, because what you said is true, but I wanted to address the question about naming, because I think the naming thing is really important.
Yes,
what he asked about the naming, especially with, I'm excited. I loved your whole discussion and conversation, because you've probably seen me some of the discussions we've had at AI about, people not taking spirituality politically, because one of the things I've always said, and why I appreciate the Kumina piece, is that people take for granted, because of how we come into learning about our spiritual systems. Whenever we do, we don't think about it as something that people politically organize with.
Yes,
like, you wouldn't be consulting welfare queen of England as your head of state. You would be consulting your Obeah person, your divination. That's a fundamentally different system, right? And I think that's why I think the Maroons are so important for nations in the Caribbean, for how we should actually develop our societies, so we don't have to be trapped in places like plantations like Toronto and London and all of that. But that's that. But to the point of names, what I was trying to say, but it's not always good when I'm typing, better when I'm speaking it. What the Greeks call Kemet is what the Greeks call Kemet, right? It's Egypt. But what the people of Kemet call themselves, as we know, is the Kemetiu, because people have different names for things. The problem we run into is when we're starting to name African things by Eurasian names, because you take on a Eurasian perspective. So it's like earlier, and I appreciate it when you say, my spirit take him, right? It's like in Jamaican context, when we say my spirit don't take them, I say that a lot, right? It's a different kind of overstanding than what English can capture, because I can't translate it in English, right? So this goes into my work. For those who don't know, it's just the way to talk about is I translate Medu Nature from a Jamaican perspective, and it's much clearer what they're saying, because when I learned it, the language, I learned it, and this applies because what I want to say is the only way I think personally we can understand African languages in the continent is we have to go through the Caribbean. Because the same concepts, like even when I'm listening to brother Shakara he's talking about what's a guan. Guan is basically kepper, basically. There's other kinds of terms we have, but guan is like kepper, right? Things are becoming what's a guan. It's not disconnected. So even as simple things like that, I think are important, because I think in the diaspora we get into this issue where we don't feel we're African, or we feel that only things on the continent are African. We don't see what is African in ourselves. And I really have to give credit to the great doctor, my teacher, Dr. Kimani Nehusi, because man, that essay he wrote, Medu Nature to Ebonics.
Yes.
That's how I could bust out all this thing, because if I never read that paper, I would never have made the connection to understanding the language, even though I'd been studying it for like 2 years. I wouldn't have gotten it. So when you're explaining things like verbs and what this means spiritually, because when you said you had something where you had the different aspects of the person, like the ba and the ka, and how in English you would translate them all into. I hope I'm not talking too much, because we love chat,
Talking.
I hope I'm not saying too much.
Talking, man. Talking.
Or is there a delay?
Yeah, there is a bit. Well, I'm not sure, but yeah, go on through.
Okay, all right, because I love chat there. So, but what I was saying, when you had the different aspects of personality, all right, when you had the different aspects of the person and personality, and Dr. Nhusi talked about this, and I like how he explained it. When you translate as spirit, it's part of the Eurasian view, because they see things in terms of physical and not physical. So if that's how you look at things, everything that's not physical is essentially spirits. But they're actually looking at African people. We look at how things work. That's why we talk about what's a guan, right? Not what has happened or what is happening, right? There's a difference, right? So I'll just kind of leave it off there, and we can reason over that.
Kings and Queens, I want people to appreciate that this is not any and anybody, on the platform right now. Brother Tristan is a very serious scholar who is at the cutting edge, of developing our understanding of the Medu Neta. And so it is an honor to have him here. And so I'm going to have a couple questions for you, my brother, on that subject here, to help to, develop my own perspective on this thing. So I hope you got a little bit of time to stay with us. And I hope that, once a month we'll get something from your presence. Big up, Brother Dali and Adolfo. So you've heard me quoting from the book Ancestral Voices.
Oh, no, I have time for you. I was so excited.
Yes, King. So go on, King.
No. Question? Sorry, it's just the delays kind of throwing me. Oh.
Yeah, don't worry. Is that I'll work in it. Let me answer Dalian's question, and then I'll come back to you, Brother Tristan, and then Brother M.A. Brown as well. All right. So, Brother Dalian, first of all, you've heard me quoting from Ancestral Voices a number of times throughout the series. And Brother Dalian is the writer of the book for Ancestral Voices called Ancestral Voices, Spirit is Eternal, which gives an overview of African spirituality. And then you have Brother Dalian and Sister Verona Spence Adolfo, who have developed the Ancestral Voices film series. So check that out, Kings and Queens. ancestralvoices.co.uk is a very, very good introduction to African spirituality. Brother Dalian asks, how do we get more folk interested in Obia when most are afraid of it due to ignorance? And question B is, how do we make it practical to the many Black experiences at the moment? In order to answer to your first question, the first thing that we have to do is understand that there is actually not an identifiable spiritual system called Obia. Yes, Obia is a terminology within a spiritual system that is referring to a particular intentionality or usage for spiritual power, if that makes sense. What happened is that after Taki, because Taki gave the white boy hell, they use obia as a catch-all terminology for all of the spiritual retentions. So now it's referred to as obia. And I don't run for the designation because I understand what they're referring to. But I'm saying from an intellectual point of view, technically speaking, they call obia everything. Yeah. So even kumina in certain circumstances is called obia. Yeah. Mayel is called obia. Yeah. They just call everything obia in that regard. Yeah. And so I think then part of the process is what we're doing today is looking at what are the spiritual retentions and what is the philosophy behind it, because a lot of us are come with our Western educated mentality, and sometimes, especially for us on the Caribbean, a lot of our cultural forms are derived from these spiritual traditions. So it's about reconnecting the cultural forms, the song and the music and the dance that we're all engaging in to the spiritual traditions, yeah, that gave birth to them, and understanding them within that context. It's also about, I in my humble estimation, African spiritual retentions in the diaspora, developing more connection to each other and developing social and political power and strength from that, from those connections. Yeah. You know, and we as Africans from the Caribbean living in white land in the West, yeah, have a key role in that, I would suggest. Because of our experiences and access to things like, you know, fast broadband and all these things. And your question B, how do we make it practical to the many Black experiences at the moment? So I've used one example, which is the idea of wellness and mental health and ritual, as you will know, as a tool, yeah, for developing wellness and mental health and them kind of things. That we have to find practical usages for our and applications for our spiritual traditions, for our spiritual philosophies in everyday life. And I think that part of that is just about us who are in the traditions becoming more and more unapologetic about our practice of the traditions and our adherence to the philosophies and these kinds of things. I think, however, that a lot of our traditions are being hijacked. Coming back to what I said and what Brother Tristan has just developed upon in relation to the politicization of the spiritual traditions, we must be unashamed in affirming that our spiritual traditions are political, because there are many who are, in the name of African spirituality, depoliticizing and seeking to take it on this airy-fairy, what my father calls spiritism, whereby it doesn't have any application in the physical world other than how am I gonna draw in abundance, money, and good sex, yeah, into my life. You understand me? I say? So yeah, that's what we have to do, kings and queens. Brother Tristan, I'm gonna go to Brother M.A. Brown, and then I'm gonna come back to you, yeah, if that's okay. All right, Brother M.A.
Yeah, good evening, bro. Good evening, everybody.
Before you go, I'll just reiterate, the link is in the chat. So anybody who wants to come through, feel free to come through. Go on through, Brother M.A.
This is actually concerning Brother Tristan, because he mentioned something about, something about it being the best route to understanding African linguistics is through our Caribbean dialects that we have already. I'm really interested in that. I've got one book. You saw that book actually, Brother Shakara. What's it called? Caribbean and African Languages, Social History, Language, Literature, and Education by Morgan Dalfinis. Yeah, so bro, I'm really interested in how the sentence structure that we find in our Caribbean dialects, how those relate to African, certain African languages and the sentence structures that can be shared between them. And also, what do you think the psychological impact is of adopting and using those more African-centered sentence structures? So what's the psychological impact of that? Because I notice it myself, and I'm sure Shakara does as well. When you switch from the standard English to patois, there's a switch psychologically that I find in myself when I switch to the patois. You get me? Or the Dominican Creole, and that's been evident to me for a long time. And I'm really interested in kind of either the metaphysical or just the psychological impact of using those intonations and sentence structures.
Wait, am I delayed or am I aligned right now?
Your audio seems aligned, but your video seems not quite. So yeah, go on, True King. We're gonna work with it still.
Okay, as long as the audio's aligned, I'll live with that. It's okay if I freeze my face.
Yeah.
I'll take the second part first of your question, and thank you, Brother Brown, for your question. The psychology. Wow, how do I say this in a clear way? I think what's important is one, it's our languages, right? And what you do for how you see yourself affects what you do for yourself, and how you see your people affects what you do for your people, right? So if you speak in your own language, you speak with the reason why you feel different is because you're being yourself, right? And I think with our languages, we have to understand them as sacred. So I think there's the psychological aspect of how you see yourself, but what the historical context does, like understanding why we talk the way we do in Jamaica or IAT, or in your case, Dominica, why we talk that way, the African context, it makes it clear why. Because, for example, if you don't know that it's an African language, you'll just think it's a deficient form of English or French, or, you'll think that way without that context. Like, for example, I'm going to go slightly off topic, but in a similar issue, one of the issues we have, the plantation I was raised in, the Toronto plantation, there's a big push of multiculturalism, which I think is what I think multiculturalism does, the sickness it does to African people, it makes our stuff not sacred. So, for example, you will have some and you probably see this. Y'all probably see this in London too, and in England. I'm sure you see this, where you will have African people wanting to teach the white people how we talk and get into the food. You'll see things like Rasta pasta. Part of this is called the disease, what I call tragic arrangements. Some may know it by its politically correct term as interracial relationships, but I use tragic arrangements. That's more accurate. So when I'm explaining to some of my younger family members about why I don't support tragic arrangements, I have to tell them why, so they don't get too sensitive, because we're in a plantation that's very multiculturalized. So it goes to language. If you understand it's your language, it's what protects you. Because it's like when Chinese people have their business, right? They know they can block out people just by language alone. They don't even have to go to war. It doesn't have to be overt. And go into this discussion today about spirituality, you notice with Indian people, right? They don't have the tragic arrangement problem like African people do. Why? Because there's certain things culturally that are embedded that they internalize, so they don't have to think. They know, I want an Indian man, I want an Indian woman, right? So when you're practicing our spirituality, it has a nationalist consciousness within it. That's why you can't understand the Akan system if you don't know the street. Right, you can't deal with Yoruba if you're not dealing with the language, right? It's the whole thing comes full circle. So I think there's that psyche and then that historical context to give the political effect. Because I'm very serious about the political thing. Because I'm tired of seeing people talk about, oh, you can have white people do voodoo and having white people do. I'm very, very, very focused on that, because it's part of the desacralization that comes from the multicultural sickness. But now, going to the first question you asked about, actually, could you repeat the first question, Brother Brown? I'm sorry.
I can't even remember myself. What? So I was.
I feel like you asked about how does it connect? I feel like that was your question.
So yeah, the question was trying to delve into an experience that I have, and I believe needs to be unpicked. So I think you've highlighted the kind of cultural aspect, the cultural importance, the socio-political importance of the language relationships. I'm trying to investigate whether there's a psychological impact, obviously linked to that cultural significance, but a psychological impact that can be measured, or that we can maybe academically explore, that occurs when you make that switch from whatever language you're talking about. So the way I'm speaking now is uncomfortable for me. For example, if I switch to, I'm not going to do it, but if I switch to like Surreal Patois, yeah, there's something that I can't explain it, but there's something that clicks, and you're saying it's a cultural comfort or familiarity, and I think it's more than that.
Well, what I mean is like it's familiarity because that's who you are. That's what I mean to say. You're right. I didn't say it to the full extent, but it's who you are when you're being yourself. Because when we're having to go to institutions where we're dealing with English, some cases, depending which plantation you're on, French, it's colonial alienation, right? That's what happens, right? Because you have to kind of conform. So you're switching up, and that's kind of what's causing the problem. So this kind of is where, with my research, I don't like to hyper personalize things, but I think it will illuminate, I guess, further like what I mean to say, or clarify a bit better. And I think get to the question I was supposed to answer, and get to your first question about with language. So when I was learning Medu Neter, I learned it from a Eurasian perspective because I'm learning it from English. Before that, I dealt with Greek because I wanted to be able to read the Greek text about Kemet. I wanted to be able to read any and anything, right? So I could understand, right? So when I'm reading Greek, when I was doing Greek, I could get Greek very quickly, right? Because I'm approaching Greek from English. The setup is the same thing. The way they do verbs, everything, that all the technicalities are the same, right? When I got to Medu Neter, I had a very mechanical understanding. So Shakara asked me like, okay, what does this word translate to? How you deal with the sentence? I can reason with him and I can do the sentence, but in terms of a constructive African conversation, that didn't happen until I came to Temple, and I link up with because I'm a PhD student, so I'm fortunate to be around, Dr. Sabala Sante, Mazama, and Nahusi all in one spot. When I read Dr. Nahusi's essay, Medu Neter to Ebonics, I was like, everything made sense now. Because now the language isn't distant to me, you know what I'm saying? So, for example, when they have a concept in Medu Neter called Wenen, if I had the glyphs on me, but anyways, Wenen is basically a concept of existence in Medu Neter that is exactly the same thing as when we say, and I don't know if Dominican uses this, but so I don't want to impose, but in Jamaica we have de and dede. In Medu Neter, they have a concept, Wenen. It's basically W, N, and N. So they can either speak with it using WN or WNN. And it's basically the same way you hear Jamaicans, we say de and dede. And it's used same exact, it's the same thing over and over, because why? You're dealing with the same people. Because language is part of being. It's an expression of being, and it's a reflection at the same time. You hear? So this is why when Shakara's talking about guan, part of it is I'm writing, so I'm kind of in that headspace right now. But I can see it in the bed. Just text me a deal with. I'm just like, okay, Kepper, guan, bruck out, bust out. When you bust out with something, that's Kepper, right? Because you're manifesting something, right? It just makes things so much clearer when I'm understanding the language. Now, if I was trying to do, because what's happening in Jamaica right now with the language issue, should you make Jamaican official? All these stupid debates, but this is what, colonialism causes. It's really interesting because the reason why I could understand Medu Neter and better now is because I'm dealing with my own language. But if I tried to do this with Greek, going from a Jamaican perspective, it would mess me up because there's no commonality. There's nothing African about Greek. Does that make more sense? So when you see the sentence structures, we're reflecting the African worldview, because when you're talking about dede and what's a guan, right? Those are two different notions of existence that English can't articulate.
Can I just piggyback off what you just said here? Because there's a phrase here, like if you're in patois, Jamaica patois, if you're expressing that two people are in a relationship, you can just say them there. Is it? Right? You know what I'm saying? It means them two there. Yeah. Now, to say that it means that they exist, yeah, as a one, if that makes sense. They're in a relationship, and that's one example. Right? And then let me educate me, brother Christian, because like for example, learning tree, especially because of the direct relationship from tree to patois. You understand patois so much more when you're learning tree, but there are the certain reflexes like repetition in order to express superlative or degrees of superlative, if that makes sense. So if you know, like if something's really, really good, you say good, 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 good. Yeah, do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Say again?
The good shoes.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You know, yeah, you know what I'm saying? But like, for example, or, you know, if something's small, you say it's small, it's small, it's small. Yeah. But then in Chile, the term is kakra, yeah. And you repeat it to enough times to express how small it is. Kakra, 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 you know what I'm saying? So does that sensibility also exist in, you know, it's a feature of the Reka Patois, like, you know, fenke, dege, so. You know what I'm saying? Like the repetition kind of gives, it emphasizes to give emphasis. So does that happen in Medjugorje?
Yep, that definitely happens. And let me give you a joke. Actually, before I give you a joke, this is why, like, I always tell him anytime I talk with Dr. Dehusi, I tell him, man, you don't know how much you changed my world when because he has, I don't know if he has essay metal. I know you know him, but his mind, you know, I can't do justice to it. But that essay revolutionized the way I understood African culture. Like when I think I knew something, I realized I knew nothing, and that's okay, right? He talks about the repetition in that. I don't know if you want me, I can link you up with it. But it's funny you brought up fenke and denge. Even certain the words they use when talking about sex is exactly like how we use them in Jamaica. It is there because I'm writing. See, you caught me at a good book because I'm writing about all this. Because part of why I'm able to do my translations, believe it or not, is because I listen to dancehall. So, this because there's certain things, and I think this is why I like dancehall. I think it's the African aesthetic of it that I like. This is why I can, deal with some of the contradictions of the artists and whatever, right? But there are certain things that are communicated that, for example, in Kemet, they have praise songs. They're very close to what you see in dancehall. It's very, even you see how like we talk about slackness or whatever, that division doesn't necessarily exist. But that's a next project. I'm actually working on a poem where, when we're talking about women, right? This was my favorite one. There's the part but to your point, yeah, there's the double repetition where they'll say things such like mash up, chaka. There's actually, I think, a phrase. I wrote down a note. Oh, this is chaka. So yeah, you see that. But so to answer your question now, to go a bit extra, when I was reading this poem, and this was one of the first things I was doing this because I was trying to figure out how do we translate as African people in the diaspora if we don't have continental languages? How do we deal with this problem? Because I can argue ideological things, but there's something missing. And then when, I put it together, I was talking to Dr. Lucy, I'm like, I was calling him up, I'm like, why don't I just translate this? He's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like he's kind of waiting for me to get to the conclusion. But one of the poems I translated, it's like he's basically, how does he say it? It's like he's talking about a girl who has a tick body, basically. Does that mean like how she body tick, right? That's basically what he says, in a slim waist, because that's how African people talk. But when you look at why is thickness, right, an African aesthetic, right? You start to go into things about fertility. It's, you see, because what is beautiful is not apart from what is functional and what is meaningful, right? It's just like, that things like that. So when I read that, I was like, wow, the poem made so much more sense. So no, that's fun. That's something I'm still working on. I submitted it for publication. I definitely distribute when available.
Yeah, man, give thanks. Bro, so in that respect now, yeah, because all right, so when you say that now, because people refer to patois as talking bad or colloquialism, yeah. And so, in a sense, we don't consider patois as something that expresses divinity, if that makes sense, right? And I'm in the mind, I'm in the mind of a particular text. I believe it's in the mouth of Pi Eddie, but I could be wrong. Where there's a line in it where he says, "I did not speak the language of the street" or something like that. That's how they translate it, yeah. And some of it people translate it as. So, Emma, mute your mic, please.
Shaka, I'm hearing like an echo.
Yeah. Emma, mute your mic, please.
Sorry, one second.
Yeah, give thanks. Yeah. So some people translate it like, "I did not speak the language of the street," and then some other people say I did not speak the language of the multitude. Yeah. So was there a differentiation from your research in Kemet between regular talk and divine speech in terms of form and mode of expression?
I suspect so. I think I would defer to Asar on that one, because I know that's really like what he focuses on, and one of the things he argues is that there were multiple. I don't know if he would say languages or wait, hold on, let me just catch this charger. All right, sorry.
Yeah.
I had to plug in the charger.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe I don't know if it would be a high-low thing as opposed to a regional difference.
Right.
But
right.
I haven't really done the research in that avenue to really comment. But I would defer. I'd be curious to also what Dr. Cambone thinks as well. I would probably defer to those two and see what they think about that. But I know that's something Brother Asar-Motep talks about in terms of that. But there's a text, I think one of the where there, because what happens too with Medu Neter, there's like a few phases of the language, right? What we know as today and what we're reading commonly is what might be called the so-called Middle Egyptian. I just call it the middle language, just to be simple, the middle language. And there's also the late language, right? So sometimes the late language started to come up where they were still speaking the middle language. So I guess what it is, certain things they will use the classical language for, and then I think certain things are colloquial. So I don't think it's as much a high and low as much as it is a functional distinction in some arenas. That's what I suspect, but I can't really rate that too much, but that's a suspicion I have.
Yes,
that's probably something I probably have to look at more.
All right, I have a couple more questions for you related to what I presented earlier in relation to Saku. And I don't know if you've done any studies on that terminology itself, or any of the terminology. So Saku, Seki, Jar, and any of those things and their meaning. So just to give our viewers a bit more of an understanding of what Baba Wayne Nobles was getting at with those terminologies.
I haven't looked at deep enough into that, but I was very excited when you said, because the first thing when you posted that up, I'm like, I'm going to start to look at how they're explained in dictionaries.
Right.
Really because what I think is, again, because when you talk about Sekem, right, and power liquid, you said, I think you said Kemet Sekem. I think you said something like Kem Sekem. And I like this because, and I was saying this in the chat, what I love about Garvey, because when I started reading, I think this is what saved me from probably being a very Afro-Saxon type of person, is I was exposed to Garvey at a young age, very young. My father would talk about, those kind of things, right? And what I think what makes Garvey stick in a way that, I don't want to say this is bad, but just in particular, because that's who I was exposed to first. It was Garvey, then Malcolm. But what made Garvey particularly stick, he talks about power. So going back to this depoliticization of spirituality, when we talk about things like Ma'at, right, and we think about it as purely peace, or everybody just getting along, kumbaya, and we do that kind of foolishness, right? We overlook the fact that these are people that had to keep people out. Right, they had to exercise authority. They have to you have to keep out the Eurasians, right? No multiculturalism. Actually, that's when I do with students in the university, I always say, notice that no African society talked about being multicultural. None of them talk about being multicultural, right? There's a level of power because we're in an era because of democracy and that's why I really also like your presentation, because there's nothing democratic about the Congo organization system. There's nothing democratic at all, right? And I don't look at democracy as a good thing, right? It's a Eurasian individualism on steroids. But what's important is that people exercise authority and power. So looking at Shechem, it's power, it's authoritative power. So that I pay attention to, that I think is important when you're looking at spirituality. This is how people run their society. But in terms of other concepts, when you're getting into like the Ba and the Ka, that's one of the issues I'm kind of dealing with in translation. How would we see it in Jamaican? And I'm thinking I probably have to look more into the Koromanti and see what they say and look at some of the tree concepts. Because what I want to do, where if I can't find it in Jamaican, if I can't find it in Koromanti, what I would do is actually just use concepts we use in continental languages and just put them in Jamaican pronunciation, just like how Kwajo becomes Kujo. And I kind of play it like that. So that's kind of it. So you highlighted one of the issues I'm trying to sort out.
Right. No, yeah, like, it's all a work in progress, you know, and that's the beautiful thing about it for me, you know, that we can get to, you know what I mean? There's so much more to discover in these things. You know what I'm saying? There's so much more to discover in these things. There's a question in the chat. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but big up selector1ness.info says, Shakara speaks. So one's true self is not concerned about being black or holding on to tribalism, nationalism. In the beginning was the word, created sound that stopped short of not focusing on the Almighty. So yeah, I'd love for you to come forward, sis, or brother. I don't know why I assumed that was a sis, Selector Oneness. It's like a sister name, isn't it? And I got a big sister called Oneness as well, so that's probably why. But yeah, and explain that little piece more. I do want to say that I don't know of divinity. I don't know of divinity and deity in African spiritual traditions that is divorced from political and social order. I don't know of this idea that we transcend the community. You know, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know that we transcend the nation. The nation itself is an expression of the macrocosmos. So it wouldn't be necessary to transcend the community because the community itself understands itself as a micro manifestation of all that is and seeks to develop itself along that consciousness. So this is a very Eastern philosophy, New Age type idea, where, you know, we are no longer Africans, we are just human beings, and it just so happens that our concept of a human being relates to the concept of an individual, which is a Eurocentric concept. And so, in a sense, even in our spiritual transcendence, we have not transcended European ideals of the self. Yeah, and I'd be careful with that. And I'm not even sure that's what you're saying. I did say I'm not sure I completely understand what you're bringing forward. So forgive me if I've misunderstood, but I'm just dealing with what I'm, you know, what I'm getting from that. And I'm not sure what you mean by created sound that stops short on not focusing on the Almighty. So yeah, again, this is a dichotomy that is entirely Abrahamic, that somehow reverence for the creation and your ancestors stops you short of the Almighty in that respect. This is a dichotomy that does not exist in the African worldview, and so with this whole series, what I've been trying to do is present the philosophical foundation from the African worldview. Yeah, so we don't have the Almighty in the African worldview is not a jealous God. Is not preoccupied with exclusive worship in that sense. The Olodumare doesn't speak in these terminologies. Onyame, Nyankopong, Nkulu doesn't relate. Amen Ra doesn't relate in these ways whereby it is concerned with the how we supplicate to it alone. You know what I'm saying? Or ultimately, it's not the same. It's not the same consciousness. So we have to look at it from an African sense of consciousness. And I hope I've addressed at least some of what you're saying there. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know? So yeah, I hope that just some of it. I'm gonna go on for a little piece more. If anybody wants to come through, feel free to come through. Ask a question, make a comment, add to the knowledge, even challenge I and I. You know, feel free to do so. Brother Christian, are you going to be repeating your? Sorry, I said Christian. Christian, are you going to be repeating your classes, your series on the Mejanetta, Introduction to Mejanetta?
Pardon? Come again.
Are you going to be repeating the course on Mejanetta?
Yes, I'm gonna. Oh yeah, definitely gonna be repeating. So I'm gonna have around the same time, roughly. I really wanted to have, yeah, basically to answer your question. Yes, right now, for those who might be looking for a course. So I just started Monday, but I'm accepting people till 15 plus 14 to the 29th. For anybody who wants to join in, you can email me. Actually, my email is Tristan.Samuels it's tristan.samuels.ai@gmail.com. I don't know how I could display this effectively. So if you're interested in a course, so that course will be running and it will run about 15 weeks, but I will be having it again, a repeat intro course. I will be doing it again around the same time. I just don't know the exact date, but I'll be doing it again next time around.
So I was talking to my teacher, my big brother, Uncle Ku, and just in terms of developing in the system of Simatawi, and I was gonna, be basically do another practitioner's course and become initiated into that. But I was saying to him, but I want to do the Mejaneta. So I was debating whether to do that first, go into the other person's course or not, or do the Mejaneta. And he said to me, do the Mejaneta. Yeah. And that was the inspiration. But I have to do the tree first for family reasons. So if I wasn't doing that right now, I'd be on your course right now. But we have to spread the money,
Yeah, whenever you come, it's no
Yes.
pressure, no rush.
Yes, King. Well, I look forward to it. Yeah, and I'm a student of Aikrea Ma as well. I don't know if you've read his works, The Eloquence of the Scribes.
I have the translations they've been doing in African languages.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't read The Eloquence of the Scribes yet.
Right. But he does emphasize the point in that text about more of us, especially in the literary fields of every description, delving into the Mejaneta and learning it. You know what I'm saying? So very, very important for so many, and it has so many applications as well. Very, very important.
Definitely does. And that's why I like that they're doing the different translations, because one of the things I think, and this is really where when I take what Akwe Arma's doing and then, looking at what Dr. Nahusi does, when he does it with Ebonics, we can really break away from Eurasian languages. That's because, like I said, I don't do anything without a political edge to it. I think if you're discussing something about politics, it's meaningless, because that's why when you ask people about spirituality, the first thing they ask, what is practical? Because we're so used to Eurasianism through Jesusism and Mohammedism, and then you get atheism, which is it's just abstract glorificationism. Right. So that's why. So if you don't have a political edge, that's part of why I'm so insistent on that. Because I've been looking at, because I'm going to take his class in tree too, but I'm like tied up same way like you, in different ways. Because what I've been doing, because I've been looking at like sporadically looking at different stuff, even reasoning with Dr. Kambon, and I see a lot of the commonalities. Because what I started doing is just translating in Jamaican, because his course just started, right? Dr. Kambon's course.
The true one, no, the last one started the 30th, so we're a few weeks in now. We're about 3 weeks in. In fact, next week is the last weekend. It's 8 classes in all.
Okay. Because what I started doing when I was looking at some of the stuff for my research, so I just been skimming grammars, listening to audio and stuff, and talking with him. There's even certain phrases that I think are exactly the same in Jamaican. Like they have a phrase "walk good." I can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught it.
It's Nante. Yeah, it means travel well. Walk. Yeah,
and it's
Nante,
just
the
translation just straight. And even Ma'at, right? Even how we translate Ma'at, like when we talk about Iri Ma'at, it's keep it real, right? Because even how we look at Ma'at becomes different. Because why is it we always talk about man talk straight, talk real? These are all ways to look at Ma'at as well. Right? What do we mean when we say talk straight? Right? All those type of things. So it's just so much fun. But I'm really serious about, because I think what it does, not just with Medu-Netre, but if we can start to access languages from the continent in our own languages, we don't have to deal with Eurasians. And I think that's really important. And not only it makes more sense, because what happens too, when they're explaining certain things, because this happened to me with Medu-Netre, certain things were very confusing. And so they bring you into their confusion when they're trying to explain something that's not them. Does that make sense? So like with Medu-Netre, the way they use verbs, the same way we use verbs in Jamaica. So they have a verb system. Just to give you just a little taste, right? There's a verb, like let's say the verb to hear is sejem, right? That's the verb to hear. right? They have something where they say it's present tense, where they say sejem f, hear him, but then you flip it over because we do subject first, him ear, right? We know in Jamaica, me hear you yesterday, me hear you today, me go hear you tomorrow, right? I have to add words to specify what time it is, right? If I say me hear you, me could hear you today, me could hear you yesterday, right? That's exactly how Nature works. Time is added, but it's optional, or I could just say me hear you, and I know the context, right? What they'll do in the grammar, and I've seen this with other African languages when I've looked at grammars, they'll explain, well, that's a present tense, but you can also translate it as past tense. That throws me off right away. That throws you off right away. And there's other, and it just the confusion just continues and continues. But if you just look at it from a Jamaican perspective, or even, and you could even say Ebonics, the way African Americans talk in the United States, it's the same thing. So you don't have to go through what time it is. It's just so much is clear. And then also we don't have to deal with, going to Eurasian institutions once we're speaking the languages and that. So I think it also cuts us away from that as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to address Selector Oneness again. She says, or he says, focusing on the Almighty is not about a creative being for idol worshippers. Focusing on the Almighty is not about creative for idol worshippers, but what as one's true nature. So yeah, there's an element when you say one's true nature. There's an element there that I'm not disagreeing with. I would encourage you to listen to a few weeks back, number 2 in this series of KIMOYO, which is entitled "Who or What is God." The concept of idol worship is a Eurocentric imposition upon African cultures. There is no concept in African tradition or African spiritual society that translates as idol worship. Yeah. What would more translate is the idea of symbols. Yeah, there are things that are symbolic of a particular understanding or a particular consciousness, and those symbols are used in rituals. But there is no African spiritual tradition that engages in worship of idols. This is an alien concept, and so this is exactly why when I began by dealing with Mama Marimba Ani in her presentation on ancestor communion, and she makes the point that we are often not given an understanding of African spirituality from an African philosophical foundation. We're using Eurocentric ideas and judging our own spiritual traditions based upon whatever standards of right, wrong, good or bad have been laid down by Eurasians, and so, or the Amu, yeah, as our ancestors would refer to them. So I'm suggesting, once again, check out the second in this series entitled "Who or What is God," and hopefully that will give you a more African-centered appreciation for the concepts that we're dealing with. And if you want to delve into a little bit of the concept of Wenen, there is a book called A Companion to African Philosophy that is edited by a brother called Kwazi Wiredu. And in that, Baba Theophile Benga has a chapter where he's breaking down concepts in Kemetu philosophy, and Wenen, Keperu, Ma'at. He doesn't delve into art, but he touches on it. But there are different concepts that he delves into in that essay. So that gives you an understanding of concepts like Wenen for anybody who wants to do further reading. All right, upon these things. Okay. Yes, family. All right, I'm gonna let the man them go and wrap up the thing proper, because it look like nobody else know what come through. But I give thanks to everybody that's come through still, including the silent viewers who have not even commented or said anything. Brother Tristan, it's an honor to link you up on online, bro. I'm an appreciator of the eyes works. Oh, and you said you can forward that essay from Elder Kimani.
Yes, yes.
Please, because I have not read it, but I know it's a classic. So yeah.
Yeah, message me on Facebook and then your email, and then I can whatever.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. Big up yourself, Ezekiel. give thanks. Right, man, then I'm gonna let you go so I'll also wrap up the thing and look down the show. But give thanks for joining me still.
All right, thank you. We gotta do this again. We have to do it again.
Oh, by the way, no, in fact, yeah, you just reminded me. Next, so from July, okay, so this year is the 100th anniversary since the International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World, yeah, that was called by Marcus Mosiah Garvey and the UNIA ACL in 1920. So nothing's a guam, but I'm going to be doing my next series in July is going to be a prelude to the month of Mosiah, where nothing's a guam in relation to celebrating Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So we're going to be breaking down the life and legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and the UNIA ACL and the future applications of the philosophy of what is referred to as African fundamentalism or Garvey Garveyism from here on out. I'm going to be joined by a couple of brothers and sisters who are going to help in that series as well. So do stay tuned for that. You just reminded me about that, Robert Christian, to say when we're going to do it again. So yeah, it's a go on.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, King. But give thanks for joining, man. Brother MA, give thanks for joining, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. Right. Family, what you see on your screen, yeah, let me make it up large, is a flyer. I am a child of the Al-Kebalan Revivalist movement, and every month, first Sunday of the month, we hold Shumida, which is translated as African traditional worship. If you want to experience traditional African ritual, feel free to join us every first Sunday of the month. Now, obviously, because of lockdown, we haven't been doing it physically, we've been doing it online, but check out the website at kebalan.org for further information, and you can come through. And I'm putting this here because I know that often it's difficult for people to find people that are in the practice of African spirituality. And so there's an example here that you can come down to and share with us in if you are so moved. And we look forward to seeing you there. Once again, kebalan.org. And yeah, a shout out to everyone who has joined me throughout this entire series. It's been kind of daunting because I've gone into a lot of different things and a lot of different research. Yeah, I'll sort you out, Robert Delia. A lot of different research and and all these things. But I do appreciate ones who have taken something from it, who have shared their feedback, who have come through and added to the information, who have presented their challenges also. I'm very much appreciative. Tendai Mwari, in fact, for unto the Most High, our Father, Creator of the universe. Kudzai Mudzimu Mukuru, give praises unto our great ancestors. Regai Mwazi, and Dinataura, Nefungwa, Zimumu Mango, then Zikwene Mimwari. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O divine creative life force of the universe. Kem Shekem, Uncle Jasaneb, Rastafari Hotep, Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodie, African power for all African people.